Hello and welcome to Salute Your Sports. Kamen Entchev here with Tom Casselman. We are back for a big show today, Tom. A lot of great stuff to go over. It's one of my favorite, if not my favorite, sports weekend. It's either, March Madness opening weekend or NFL wildcard weekend. I mean, for me, I'm a World Cup guy, Olympics guy. Sometimes those are better, but they're once every 4 years. In terms of every single year, this is one of the two dream weekends that I circle on my sports circle, and I get fired up like crazy. We have some massive matchups and some just incredible storylines. This is what it's all about. Storyline Casselman over there. You like a good story. I don't even know which one's the best one. We could talk about that as well, but we really probably won't because we have so much stuff to go over. But Tyreek Hill back at Arrowhead Stadium, Matthew Stafford back in Detroit, Mike McCarthy taking on the Packers, all that and plenty more. We'll break down all these games. We'll have our NFC, AFC championship predictions, our Super Bowl predictions, all that and plenty more. A lot of big coaching news this week. I know we were just talking about it right before the show. Do we lead with the coaches? Do we lead with the picks? There's no right answer, but we are going to be talking about Bill Belichick stepping down in New England, mutual parting. Pete Carroll, mutual parting in Seattle. And then, of course, I'd argue the Nick Saban one for me is the biggest because we'll see if Belichick comes back or not. But Nick Saban is officially retired. He's officially done. So we'll talk about his legacy. And there's so much stuff happening that we're going to relegate the college football national championship recap to the bottom of the show. That's how much stuff we have to talk about. Quite frankly, not the most thrilling championship game, although some of us were very happy with the result.
Money, sure
please. Some of us were. Michigan -5, baby. Cash it in. Speaking of cashing in, betting picks, our show was 5-1 this week, Tom. 5-1. I got all 3-0. I can't remember the last time I went 3-0 on the show, but I am super pumped. We absolutely obliterated the locks of the week. And of course, the only one we missed was you missing the Bears. I told you never trust the Bears. That's just how it is. I'll probably talk about Eberflus as well at the end of the show, but cannot wait to get started. How are you doing on this epic sports week? I mean, this is an epic week. You can't. That's literally the word.
Yeah.
It's an overused word, but I can't not use it enough because that's how big this week is.
Yeah, it was just one top story after another, of course, with the big coaching news and everything. And because there's so much uncertainty around the future for a lot of the coaches, and one in particular, his future is pretty well set in Nick Saban. But for the other ones, because there's so much more to talk about that we simply don't know quite yet, we're going to start with the games because, I mean, it's super wild card weekend. As much as I think that seventh playoff team more often than not is kind of a meh kind of team. It does add one more football game for us to watch this weekend. We've got 2 on Saturday. We have 3 on Sunday, and then we have 1 on Monday. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Hope all of you Chiefs and Dolphins fans that are outside of those respective metropolitan areas have Peacock. Otherwise,
I do.
A little bit of money for
Peacock,
the league. Kamen talking
baby.
about wanting some money off of his locks of the week and his bets. NFL, NBC, they're making a little bit of money as well. I wonder, it's kind of convenient that the game that features the Taylor Swift tie into everything is the one that they put on the separate channel.
I have nothing bad to say about Taylor Swift. I went to the movie
nothing bad about
concert.
Taylor Swift. I'm talking about the NFL capitalizing on, hey, if the Swifties want to get in on this a little bit, they can show up for some Peacock. But that's exactly where we'll start with the games, actually. Let's just go right into one that, I mean, if we're going based off what you said at the beginning of the season, this is the biggest game in the AFC playoffs. This is the game that determines. Instead of meeting up in the conference championship game, we are finding the Dolphins and the Chiefs matching up at the Super Wild Card weekend. And instead of the 1 and 2 spot in the conference, perhaps it's the 3 and the 6. So it's going to be an interesting game for myriad reasons. I mean, we've got 2 of the best offensive minds in Andy Reid and Mike McDaniel, although for the Chiefs, the numbers don't quite bear out offense being good for them this season. We're also going to have frigid cold temperatures at Arrowhead Stadium. Of course, Miami being a warm state team, how much
Mhm.
of a factor is that going to
A
become? And
lot.
is it even? You think it's going to be a lot? Okay, let's just get into
Well,
it. Why do you think
yeah.
that the cold's going to be a huge
Well,
factor?
well, sheesh, I looked this up and I was looking for it. I saw the graphic last night on ESPN. Miami, something like in their last 10 games below 40 degrees, they've lost. We're talking about
Mm-hmm.
below 40. This is going to be 2 degrees, Tom. This is, I
Yeah,
mean, this
not
is,
including wind chill.
yeah, not including wind chill, not including, feels like temperature. It's going to be brutal. Miami's used to that, let's run up and down the field in warm weather. Let's, literally outrun the other guys. The snow gets a little slick. The speed advantage gets, minimized a little bit. This absolutely is going to be a massive, massive cold weather game. I remember the Chiefs' first Super Bowl run. Their playoffs started against the Colts in literal snow, and the Colts were not ready because they're an indoor team.
Mm.
The Chiefs know how to win in these snow games. And actually, a lot has been said about the Chiefs offense. Like their numbers are down on points per game and they are down a little bit on yards. But if you look at total yards, again, it's not really that far back. They just have not finished drives. The drop passes have led to field goals. I don't know if they're going to figure out how to catch the ball in the playoffs. I'm hoping they do. I think that maybe this is the Chiefs optimist in me, but you know this very well, Tom. You're going to have X amount of bad plays in a given year. Get them all out early, right? This is absolutely a huge advantage for the Chiefs. I mean, Arrowhead Stadium already is an advantage as it is. Miami already not as good on the road, especially against good teams. And that's only the second biggest advantage in this game, though. The biggest one is the
Mm-hmm.
injuries, because Miami is without its edge rusher, Bradley Chubb, one of its two Pro Bowl cornerbacks, Xavier Howard. They have Cameron Good, Jerome Baker, Andrew Van Ginkel, three starting linebackers, I think, or three of their key linebackers out. Almost half their defense is out in this game, and they already lost to the Chiefs head-to-head in Germany, and that game was. And that was, a neutral field game.
Mm-hmm.
I think Kansas City has a really good team that matches up well with the Dolphins. The Dolphins are all about, airing the ball out. They're a really good run team too, but their passing game is their number one thing. And Kansas City is fourth against the pass. Last time against Miami, they kept Tua under 200 passing yards. Tyreek Hill, 62 receiving yards. It's just a tough matchup for Miami, any which way you slice it. I know we talk about the whole rust versus rest thing. Well, one team that could probably afford rest of their top players is a team that knows how to win in the playoffs, right? Kansas City, 5 straight AFC championship games. They've played in, 3 Super Bowls and won 2 of them. So I had to do my math. Did they lose just one? They lost only one to the Bucks. Just horrible memories. But anyway, so I think that for Kansas City, everything like adds up to them having a massive edge. The home field, the intangibles, the health, the experience. I mean, Miami, they really don't win playoff games. It's been a long time since they've won one. Kansas City has won more playoff games the last 5 years than any team by a long shot in the NFL. So I like Kansas City in this game. I think there's going to be a little bit of something from Mahomes and Kelsey. They've been a little bit banged up, Kelsey in particular, having that week off to kind of not only reset physically, but also mentally. I think we might be seeing a Chiefs playoff run this year, Tom, that a lot of folks have miscounted. Because, again, their passing game with the drops is not maybe what it used to be. But you look at their defense, the best I've ever seen in recent memory, and even their running game. Isaiah Pacheco is a better running back than they've had, and he's a tough guy. The guy that can maybe get you some yards in the snow. And, we could sit here and say, oh, my God, the sky has fallen in Kansas City. They were 11-6. MVS drops the game-winning catch against the Eagles. We had Kadarius Toney get a pick 6 against the Lions, which if that one doesn't bounce off his hands for a pick 6, they win that game. They were without Chris Jones and Travis Kelce in that opener, by the way, as well. Then we have the Kadarius Toney penalty. I mean, we're and even the Broncos game, they had a Sky Moore drop. I know they dropped them, but they're 3 or 4 plays away from being 14-3. We're talking about them having the number 1 seed. We're talking about Mahomes winning another MVP. I know it's that's how the game is. It's a matter of inches and small plays. But really, Tom, we're talking 3 plays away from a 14-win season. Things have not been quite as bad as you think. It's just like we're so used to them being so good that 11 wins all of a sudden is not good enough, guys. I mean, come on. This what's the saying? To be the man, you got to beat the man. Well, let's see someone beat the Chiefs in the playoffs, because a lot of those losses this year, NFC teams. These teams the Chiefs know in the playoffs, Buffalo can beat them in the regular season. That's happened a lot the last few years. But come playoff time, the only people to knock out the Chiefs are Tom Brady and the Patriots and Joe Burrow and the Bengals. I don't see Tom Brady in the playoffs. I don't see Joe Burrow in the playoffs. I see clear sailing to the Super Bowl for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Well, that's interesting. And as we get it later on to into that segment, a couple interesting stats to look at when it comes to looking at the Chiefs potentially making it to that stage in the playoffs. But I agree with you that at the very least they win in this particular matchup against the Miami Dolphins. You mentioned with all the injuries that the Dolphins have on defense, and it really at what I would consider the second most important set of positions to fill out on a team. I mean, obviously, number one to get is the quarterback. Number two is guys who can get after the quarterback, pass rushing and pressuring the quarterback, where you don't necessarily have to blitz. I mean, Vic Fangio on defense is as good as anybody, as dialing up some pressure without necessarily having to negate or leave big gaping holes with his own defense or something along those lines. But like I said, with as many guys out, and I caught myself with this conundrum or with this thought in my head, and it's not really a fair thought. But when I saw the weather forecast, I thought, well, these guys from Miami, there's no way that they're going to even want to be there, which is a crazy notion to have. Like, you're in the playoffs, you have a sacred chance to go out and make it to the Super Bowl. Why am I thinking that a group of professional athletes are just not going to show up because it's really, really cold out? But that's just an innate sense and innate feeling that I have. I think that this is going to really highlight for Miami, if they can win this game, it's going to be how does Mike McDaniel scheme up probably some more run game stuff instead of focusing on the deep passing, because like you said, Kansas City's defense has been phenomenal this year, second in the league in scoring, and it was by a pretty close margin. They missed out, a little less than a point per game behind the Baltimore Ravens for the second best scoring defense in the league. But I mean, L'Jarius Sneed, they've got quality corners, they've got a quality defense. But the one thing that I think we've seen, particularly like in the Dallas game, even in the Eagles game, like the way that the Miami Dolphins were able to get some pretty big plays is using Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane for getting these big runs. I think that's going to be kind of the key. If Miami is able to get the running game going where the clock is ticking and they're also still getting those big explosive plays, that can be the way that they defeat Kansas City. But even then, I mean, it's hard. I can't pick against the Chiefs at home. I think that they just have too much going for them. And I think that the Dolphins are too diminished to overcome that type of difference. So it's kind of unfortunate. I think we would see a much more entertaining game if it were maybe like 20, 30 degrees warmer.
Yeah,
if it's
absolutely.
sitting, if it's above freezing, I think this is a lot more appealing game. But having it that late at night with the cold and everything, I don't see a whole lot of points going on the board, and that favors Kansas City, in my opinion. So I think the Chiefs are going to take this one, and they're going to be.
And they'll cover 4.5.
You think they'll cover 4.5?
Oh yeah.
I think that there's something else that's not going to happen, but we'll get into that a little bit later on in the show. Of course, earlier in the day on Saturday, we are going to have the Cleveland Browns in Houston, Texan at NRG Stadium to take on the Texans, a team that went worst to first this year, like we see it every single year in the NFL. We've got a head coach of the year candidate in DeMeco Ryans. We've got
both of them. Both coaches.
Yeah, Kevin Stefanski. Yeah, I mean, I'd say, they're for different reasons. Both coaches have done a really, really impressive job this year, and they get rewarded with pretty close a matchup. I mean, the point spread I think is like sitting around 2 points, give or take, right now, give or take half a point, something like that. And really a lot of different ways of getting here. I mean, for the Houston Texans, it was C.J. Stroud. It was an explosive offense. On the other side, it's an amazing defense for the Cleveland Browns. A lot of talent on that side of the ball, and then a renaissance. We're talking about awards. We've got a potential
Isn't it
comeback player.
Renaissance?
Renaissance, however you want to say it. Renaissance is a
I
little
say
bit
it.
more pretentious, which
Oh,
is why I go for
say
that.
I say Renaissance.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Again, pretentious.
The more
but
you
Joe
know.
Flacco, Joe
Okay.
Flacco coming in, and Jets didn't want him. Jets had a really good defense too. Jets probably could have used a Joe Flacco this year, but I digress on that point that I had much earlier in the season.
You hit the Zach Wilson on the spot, by the way.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Anyway, I'll let you go.
Cleveland is the one that made the phone call, and Cleveland is the one that benefits. So, Kamen, in this matchup of Joe Flacco with a great defense, remind me if you've heard that story before in his career, against an upstart C.J. Stroud, who had a fantastic rookie season. Really, I mean, this is going to be a fun matchup to watch for different reasons.
Yeah, I think this is the toughest game for me to pick this week.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I went back and forth. There's really, really good reasons to pick both teams. Browns which is interesting that I almost thought this would be a pick'em game, but Browns are actually 2-point favorites, and they say, home field is 2 to 3 point advantage. So this was a neutral field, it would be a 4 to 5 point spread, which I kind of don't really think is really fair necessarily to Houston and what they've done. So, I mean, Browns won the earlier matchup 36-22, but it was actually a 3-4 touchdown game most of the way. The Texans got some garbage time, although the big thing, obviously, C.J. Stroud did not play in the earlier matchup. So, I mean, that's Houston without their best player. So how much do we read into that game? I don't know. I mean, the Houston's one weakness is probably that secondary. And, Amari Cooper had 265 receiving yards, Flacco 368 passing yards. Is that going to happen again? Probably not. Maybe Flacco gets 300. I mean, Amari Cooper's not getting 265. I feel pretty good about that prediction. A lot of it is going to come down to, can they force some Flacco turnovers? Because Flacco has been incredible passing the ball, but he has been turnover prone. So that's really the X factor in the game. Does Flacco throw like one interception? Then it could go either way. If he throws two, then I'm feeling pretty good about Houston. But the reasoning for the Browns to win is, they won earlier this year. They have a team that matches up well against that secondary. And it's Joe Flacco in the playoffs. He's won a Super Bowl. C.J. Stroud, his first playoff game. How much does experience matter? I don't know. The reasoning to pick Houston in this game is they're at home. They're 6-3 at home. The Browns are just 3-5 on the road. And even though he is a rookie, I mean, I'm looking at this game. Who's the best player on the field? It's C.J. Stroud. I mean, this guy makes so many crazy passes. He almost looked Mahomes-esque on one of those plays against the Colts where they're coming at his face. He's dropping backwards off his back foot, just slobs the ball up. I think it was Nico Collins made the catch
probably
for the first down. I mean, this guy is a flat-out gamer. I mean, C.J. Stroud might already be a top 5 quarterback in the league. If not, he'll certainly be there in the next couple of years. I think he might already be better than Trevor Lawrence in that AFC South, which is crazy to think about. So I have kind of, how I am, Tom. I get romantic about my athletes. Yeah, call it jumping on the bandwagon, whatever. I'm getting romantic about C.J. Stroud and the way he plays the game of football. I am a huge, huge Stroud fan. Houston also won me some money this last weekend.
Sure.
So got to go with the hot hand. That was my locks of the week pick last week. I will not pick it this week. I was very tempted, +2, but I'm not confident enough because there's also sort of this romantic story about Joe Flacco and this journey he's been on. How if they win, they can play the Ravens in the next round. And I'm trying to think to myself, it's like, I mean, what is this Cleveland Brown organization? The organization that brought in Kareem Hunt, that brought in Deshaun Watson. There's just, you don't want to cheer for them as an organization, but you also want to cheer for Joe Flacco. It was kind of like Washington, with all the issues they had in the front office, but then I like Ron Rivera, so he's cool. So it's one of those, very, mixed emotions, both on who I want to win and who I think is going to win. So it really comes down to how much does the pressure get to CJ Stroud? And that Colts game was a virtual playoff game. I mean, that was a playoff game, if we're being honest. Winning in, and he delivered in that game. I'm going to say CJ Stroud delivers again. The Texans win a close one. It is my toughest pick all weekend, though, Tom. So I'm going to go Houston in a close one.
Yeah, for me, I'm in pretty much the same boat that you are in picking this game, except I'm going to go against my heart. I'm going to be rooting for Houston in this one. But there is a pretty decent difference between the Colts defense and the Browns defense.
To be sure.
And the Colts almost won that game. I mean, they had a really good opportunity at the end. They were down 6, a touchdown and an extra point wins the game. They make a questionable play call.
They took out their star player on 4th and 1. I get that he's not really a receiving back necessarily, but season on the line. And of course, it's very easy to say that because, what if that, I think that was a 3rd string running back. What if he catches the ball, they go on and win the game? No one's talking about that at all. But 4th and 1, whether you use him as the running back to run the ball on 4th and 1 or a decoy, that made no sense. It was almost karma that they lost not having Jonathan Taylor in at that time.
This is what I call process over results. Whether he catches the ball or not, I mean, we're not talking about it as a bad decision if Goodson catches the ball, but certainly it's questionable that you don't have your best offensive player, and I don't think that's really even close to being a question in Indianapolis. No, Michael Pittman's really good, but
no, it's Taylor.
You go with Taylor on that one. But yeah, I mean, the Browns defense is considerably, stauncher than the Indianapolis Colts. And if we're talking about, Gardner Minshew, he's pretty good for a backup quarterback. Well, so is Joe Flacco. The weapons for and the strengths for the Cleveland Browns are kind of similar to what Houston had, not necessarily as good with a singular running back, but between Jerome Ford, Kareem Hunt, you've got a pretty good rushing attack. You've got Amari Cooper, to a lesser extent, Elijah Moore, David Njoku at tight end. There's plenty of weapons for the Browns to utilize as well. So basically, like with the way that Flacco has been playing, I mean, he's at the tail end. In fact, he's probably past the whole prime of when your football mind is at its best and you're also still at your physical peak capabilities. Certainly at 38, he's not quite the a quarterback that he was talent-wise, but I mean, he's seen everything that Houston could possibly throw at him. So I'm going to go with the Browns in this one. I agree with you, though. It's going to be a pretty close one. Moving on to a matchup that isn't particularly close. I have this as my easiest pick of the weekend with the news that TJ Watt is going to be out. Mason Rudolph is going to be the quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And they find themselves double-digit underdogs going into Buffalo. This is going to be probably there's not a whole lot to go over. I mean, Mike Tomlin, of course, is a fantastic coach. He's going to have his guys on their A game, but their best isn't better than the Bills' good, I would say. I think that there's just too much talent on both sides of the ball for Buffalo. Too little talent. They just don't have the firepower on either side of the ball to really make a big difference. This is one of those games where it might be close for 3 quarters, but ultimately we're going to see the better talent winning out with Buffalo at home in this one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going Buffalo too. It's a no-brainer pick. Obviously TJ Watt, since his debut in 2017, I'm just looking up something real quick.
Sure.
Yeah, they didn't play this year, but I know the Steelers recently beat the Bills, by the way. But since TJ Watt's debut in 2017, Pittsburgh is 1-10 in games he doesn't play. So talk about an X factor, the best defensive player in the league, TJ Watt. Now, interestingly enough, these are two teams that are both really hot. Pittsburgh with 3 straight wins, Buffalo with 5 straight wins. Just 3-4 weeks ago, both of these teams were on the outside looking in, and all of a sudden they're both in the playoffs. Buffalo is the 2 seed. That's crazy. We had 4 11-6 teams in the AFC, by the way. So it's a very, very crowded, evenly matched conference when it comes to this. So, I mean, I think the Bills have a lot more explosiveness on offense. Mason Rudolph is Pittsburgh's best option at quarterback. But you look at what Pittsburgh does even with him. Their numbers with him are way better than Kenny Pickett or Trubisky. So he gives them the best chance to win. 100% the right call to go with him, even though Pickett's healthy. but they just don't have the explosiveness to keep up with Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Cook at the running back spot. Kincaid has been really, really good as well lately for Buffalo. So it's interesting because I'm probably going to pick Buffalo to win by, 2-3 touchdowns, but I'm also not fully convinced they're going to win. I actually probably feel slightly more confident in the Dallas game, if I'm being honest, even though for some reason I'm picking Buffalo in my locks of the week and not Dallas. But Mike Tomlin is a master of game planning. The one way Pittsburgh can win is if Josh Allen turns the ball over 3 to 4 times. And that is possible. We've seen that happen before.
Sure.
That is Pittsburgh's route to victory, but he could probably even turn it over twice and still get away with it. So Buffalo just has so much more talent. They should win this game, by double digits, Tom. I think Buffalo wins.
Yeah, I mean, the Pittsburgh Steelers got into the playoffs with a 10-7 record while having the 5th worst offense in the NFL this year. So that's pretty indicative of what they're going to need to have happen.
One win less than Buffalo, though. So, that's just, that's one way to look at it, but it is true.
Yeah, I mean, that's the difference between a win-loss column and some more advanced stats like, say, DVOA that take different factors into account. But we'll move on to the Rams and the Lions. This is probably the biggest storyline game of the week, I would say. I mean, I know there's Tyreek returning to Arrowhead. There's going to be McCarthy going up against the Packers. But, I mean, between Stafford and Goff, when you've got two quarterbacks that were traded for each other, and seemingly to both of their successes. I mean, Stafford goes on and wins a Super Bowl with the LA Rams. Meanwhile, the Lions have emerged from decades of just kind of a malaise sitting at the bottom of the NFC North to winning the division, to hosting a playoff game. There's a lot to be excited about. But for me, this is my first upset that I'm picking of Wild Card Weekend because I'm going with the Rams in this one. The Detroit Lions have a ton of advantages. We see the home road splits that they have, but Matthew Stafford and the Rams have a better offense than the Detroit Lions do as far as scoring goes. I believe, as I'm looking at it here, better scoring defense as well. So I think that they've got. I mean, it's going to be a fun game because I think that Dan Campbell is a pretty good head coach. He's got a great offensive coordinator who's going to be having a lot of suitors for whenever he is available for some head coaching
but
interviews.
Not the Bears, though.
Not the Bears, though. A quick correction on the numbers. The Lions did have a better scoring offense than the Rams did this year. So I want to correct that really quickly. Rams a bit better on defense. But I think that the Rams have the edge at quarterback, Stafford over Goff. I like what they have at the skill positions with Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. Kyron Williams has been a revelation this season. And I mean, Detroit has some good options as well, but Lions potentially without rookie standout tight end Sam Laporta, that's going to be an issue. And then the Lions, I mean, they started out the year great on defense and have been just sliding down ever since slipping off a pretty good pace that they were on early in the season. So I'm going to go with the Rams in this one in a road upset. I think technically it's going to be an upset. I think that Detroit is favored at home, but
by 3.
By 3, yeah. So I just like the Rams in this one. I like McVay and what he's been doing this year.
Yeah, this is the second toughest game. I mean, obviously Eagles, Bucks, who knows what the Eagles are playing. That's the third toughest game, but there's just 2 games I struggled with: Texans, Browns, Rams, Lions. This was my second hardest pick. I'm going to go with Utah. I'm going to pick the Rams as well. By the way, there's a crazy graphic that I saw since the trade of Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff. They have the exact same amount of wins and the exact same amount of touchdown passes, Tom. Their passer rating, their picks, their completion percentage are all nearly identical. So statistically, they've been basically the same player. Obviously, Stafford did get the ring. Goff didn't. But Goff almost had one anyway with the Rams. So this is it's kind of like a rare case where the trade worked out for both sides.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, Matthew Stafford, I think I agree with you, is better than Jared Goff. But, I mean, I don't think he's much better. Jared Goff is a really good quarterback, and I think he was really underappreciated. I don't know, what it was with him and McVay that didn't work. Maybe McVay just wanted just a little bit better. He's like, we were just like right there, just a wee bit better. We'll get there. He went out and got Matthew Stafford, but Goff is fantastic. I mean, both of these guys are without question top 10 quarterbacks in the league, pushing that top 5 contention as well. But I'm going to lean. I mean, look at the stats. Goff is 4th in touchdown passes this year, Tom Casselman. And Matthew Stafford is 2 years removed from winning the Super Bowl, played some great football.
Yeah, but if we're picking quarterbacks, I don't think that they're sniffing the top 5. They're sniffing top 10. I don't think they're
I think if you look at the NFL, Tom, there's probably the difference between the 4th best quarterback and the 9th best is almost nothing. If you put either one of them in your top 5, I probably won't get mad at you. I actually personally, Tom, if I'm picking 5 quarterbacks, I might put Matthew Stafford in my top 5 right now. He's done a lot more in big games than Justin Herbert. I trust him more than Lamar Jackson. Call me crazy. I'm looking at the NFL. It's probably Mahomes, Hurts, Allen, Burrow, and then maybe Stafford for me. I'm a big Stafford guy, personally. Yeah. Always have been. Yeah. Always have been. I'm not talking about 10 years down the road, but for one game, who do I like? I like Matthew Stafford. I think he his numbers are good this year, but he's coming off an injury, and we've seen how well he's played the back half of the year. That's more of the Matthew Stafford I think we have, as opposed to the one earlier this season when Cooper Kupp was hurt, when Stafford's coming off an injury. I mean, you look at what he did 2 years ago when healthy. He was arguably the best quarterback in the league that year, certainly top 2 or 3. So either way, I digress on that point. You could sit here and argue, whatever. They're in that 5 to 10 range for me. And really, Mahomes is Mahomes. After Mahomes, a lot of these guys, it's just take your pick. They're so close. I don't think there's a clear cut, that guy's definitely number 3. Is the number 3 guy much better than the number 7 guy? No. They're all pretty close. A lot of it depends on situation. But if you look at any stats, you look at the quarterback stats this year, there's not a quarterback that is way better or way worse than anyone else that is in the top 10 stats-wise. And same for record-wise, because all these teams that have 10, 11 wins, 12 wins, I mean, most of these teams are within 1 or 2 wins of each other. But back to this game, Lions are 3-point favorites at home. The last time the Lions won a playoff game, Tom, can you guess who was president?
That would have been Clinton, right? 91?
Nah, you might have to go. Clinton. Didn't Clinton become president in 94? No, 92.
92. Okay, so that would be H.W. Bush.
Yes, the other George Bush.
Yeah.
So actually, I'm not. Now that I think about it, I gotta do the inauguration dates, but it would have been close. It was 1992, Tom. I was a little bebe living in Bulgaria. That's what I was at the time. It's been a long, long time. It shouldn't matter, right? It's this year. It doesn't matter.
Exactly.
But it's the Detroit Lions, though, Tom. It has to matter to some extent. I mean, I know Goff has the playoff experience, but how many of these guys have that NFL playoff experience in that roster? Not many. And I'm not talking about, players, coaches, all of it. It's a whole different step in the game. The Rams are 2 years removed from their Super Bowl win. I know they lost their offensive lineman that retired. I know Jalen Ramsey is gone. I know Aaron Donald's not the player he was. But you look at the keys to their Super Bowl run, in particular in the playoffs, in the Super Bowl, Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, they were the 2 biggest guys. They're still there. And their passing game and their offense is actually even better than that team. Puka Nacua is better than OBJ was. Kyron Williams is a great running back, 3rd in the league in rushing yards. I look at what Detroit did against CeeDee Lamb. They couldn't stop him. He went for over 200 receiving yards. The Rams have 2 guys that are capable of doing that. 200 yards in the game, Kupp and Nacua both. It's an indoor game, something that, the Rams are very well known for as well. Matthew Stafford knows how to win in that stadium. He's won more games in that field than almost any player, period, Mr. Matthew Stafford. By the way, I don't know if you remember this, Tom, when Matthew Stafford won the Super Bowl with the Rams in Detroit, there was parades and celebrations. They love Matthew Stafford so much in Detroit, just like Kansas City loves Tyreek Hill. Arrowhead Stadium's going to cheer on the Cheetah. The Lions are going to cheer on Stafford, at least in the pregame introductions. Once the game goes on, I'm not saying they're going to be cheering, the touchdown passes he'll be delivering. But it's going to be a good game, no doubt about that. I think Stafford is better than Goff. I actually look at, Kupp and Nakua versus, I know Laporta's really good. I know he may or may not play, but I would take Kupp and Nakua over Laporta and Amon-Ra, even though those are, that's pretty tight as well. But I just think the Rams have that playoff experience, and Detroit's defense has been exposed. Their secondary has been exposed, and you're going up against Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nakua, and let's not forget Sean McVay, one of the best offensive minds in the game. All I got to say is good luck to you, Detroit. Give me the Rams to win this game outright against Detroit.
Yeah, another matchup. I think this one is going to be an interesting one because we could arguably see either coach that loses this game on the hot seat potentially fired after Wild Card Weekend with Todd Bowles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Wow.
Somebody had to win the NFC South, and it ended up being them. And then Nick Sirianni and the Eagles, a team that has been playing absolutely horrendously down the stretch, 1-5 to close out the season. I'm not really a huge believer in good or bad momentum per se, but it definitely not good vibes in Philadelphia as the season has wound down. So a comment for this matchup, I mean, we're looking at a Bucs team that not necessarily special on offense. I know that Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans have had a great connection all this season, but you look at the overall numbers, not a special offense in Tampa Bay. Pretty darn good defense, though. That's been a strong point for them. And when you turn it over to the other side, the Philadelphia Eagles, I mean, they've got the tush push that's helped them put up a top offense this year. I believe they're top 10, I think maybe 7, something like that. Let me just pull that up really quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, great show production right there, me counting. But they've got something working on offense. They know what they can do in short yardage situations, but their defense has been
atrocious.
Bottom 5, which is something that coming into the season, we know there's probably going to be a little bit of a step back from the Super Bowl caliber defense that they had last year. But with the way that they've played, there's no chance, I think, that the Eagles make it to the Super Bowl. Is there a chance that they make it out of this game? And again, we could see either of these coaches getting fired if they don't win.
I don't think either coach is going to get fired personally, Tom.
With all the guys that are available, with a Mike Vrabel, with a Bill Belichick, a Pete Carroll. Now's the time to be bold.
Now, Pete Carroll's supposedly going to be advisor to Seattle, but we'll see if that holds up. Actually, now that you mention it that way, I was thinking to myself, not a chance, but those guys you just listed,
this is the best. I mean, jumping my statement of the week up, this is the greatest coaching availability class we've ever seen ever.
Yeah,
there's so many good bona fide coaches out there, and there could be, there's going to be some potentially other openings. We don't know what Pittsburgh's necessarily going to do. I think they'd be crazy if they let go of Mike Tomlin, but Tennessee did that with Mike Vrabel. Andy Reid could retire. I mean, we've got so much craziness in coaching.
I don't know.
The Andy Reid one might. There's some rumors swirling that have piqued my interest.
Not a chance. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of crazy to think about. Just real quick on that coaching front. I mean, Nick Sirianni was in the Super Bowl last year. It's
how soon after Doug Peterson winning a Super Bowl did he get fired? It was only a couple of years. It wasn't that long.
3? Maybe. Well, the Doug Peterson firing didn't make any sense, just to be clear. But that's how it is in the NFL. A lot of times, that's why I think teams are too quick to pull the gun out on these coaches. But that just, they're maybe the Chargers with Staley and maybe the Bears with Eberflus are exceptions to the rule. But generally speaking, franchises are too quick to let their coaches go. That just happens. For example, Malone in Denver in the NBA, they held on to him after a few just okay seasons, and that worked out pretty well, Tom. Sometimes patience is a virtue, as they say. Also, Bulls. I mean, the Bucks, do they have a great team? I think their record is about where it should be with that team. 9-8 in a weak division. Baker Mayfield, he's just okay. Like, he's not awful, but that's like a mediocre quarterback. You don't really, their running back is okay. Their defense is good. Mike Evans is great, but outside of Mike Evans, who's really great, I don't know. So I really don't know if their record should be any better than it is, Tom, personally. But either way, as far as this game itself, it really depends on which Philadelphia team we see. Do we see the Eagles of the first half? If we do, obviously Eagles win. Do we see the Eagles of the last 6 weeks? If we see that team, they'll lose. My gut feeling is we're going to see an Eagles team somewhere in between, better than they were the last 6 weeks, not as good as the first 10, 11 weeks. And if they're somewhere in the middle, it's probably going to be just enough to beat the Bucs. I mean, there is more talent in Philadelphia. I know the defensive coordinator got blamed for those Chiefs touchdowns, which, who's going to beat Andy Reid in a chess match? Not many. So it seems like they were probably a little bit too quick to get rid of their defensive coordinator last season in Philadelphia. I still think I look at, Jalen Hurts.
Well, he got hired. He got hired to the Cardinals.
As the head coach?
Yeah. So they didn't fire him. He got hired away. That's why they don't have him.
Okay. Well, that's fair. That is a good point. But still, I know some people were not happy with him after the Super Bowl. Well, it turns out that they probably want him back right now. But as far as this game, I look at Jalen Hurts. I look at Baker Mayfield. I look at Jalen Hurts. I look at Baker Mayfield. It doesn't go down to one position. We know that. But the quarterback position is pretty important. I look at Jalen Hurts. I look at Baker Mayfield. I think you know which way I'm headed. I'm going to pick Philly in a close one. Eagles do bounce back. I don't think they're going to be making a Super Bowl run. I think Kansas City is far more likely because, it's weird. Again, Kansas City is in the top half, top 10 in the league in passing yards, top 10 in the league in total offense. It's one thing to, correct your offense by finishing drives. The Eagles are giving up a lot of yards and points on defense. That seems like it's uncorrectable. I think Kansas City has a much more, clear path to, fixing those mistakes and getting that offense up. Because, again, Tom, their offense, it's not like it's not getting yards. Kansas City's offense is moving the ball up and down the field, not at will, but they're moving pretty well. If we take in the drops and they finish a few of these drives, the offense looks pretty similar to what we've seen all these years. It's a game of inches, third down conversions, red zone, stuff Kansas City used to be great at, stuff they haven't been great at. That is stuff that can be somewhat correctable. The Eagles are just giving up so much yards that I don't know if they can fix the defense in this short window, but I don't know if they have to against the Bucs. I mean, the Bucs just put up 9 points against a pretty bad Carolina team. 9 points will not cut it against Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, DeAndre Swift, Dallas Goedert. There's a lot of talent on that Philadelphia team. Enough talent to get by the Bucs in this game.
Yeah, against my better judgment, I'm going to go with the Eagles as well, because it's one of those things where if this were Week 19 of the NFL season and we were just picking a regular matchup, I think we'd be a lot more inclined to side with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But because it's the playoffs, we're going to give a little bit more credence, a little bit more importance, and say, oh no, the Eagles are going to figure something out from the way that they've been playing. I'll give them I don't even know if I want to give them half a pass on what happened with their closeout game when they lost to the Giants, because I think they didn't come into that game looking to steamroll. It wasn't like it was a close game. They kind of were down a bit and then just decided, you know what, let's just put Marcus Mariota in. Let's just wave the white flag. We'll just accept the 5th seed, go to Tampa. That'll be fine. And I think it's one thing if, as the Philadelphia Eagles, you make that decision ahead of time and we all go into the game knowing, okay, this is why, Baltimore lost to Pittsburgh twice this season, for example, because they sat Lamar Jackson, because they were resting up some of their key important guys. This is why San Francisco lost to the Rams, because they sat so many important guys. I mean, the Rams did too, which is actually a decent point for the rest versus West argument for the Rams against the Detroit Lions. But I'm going to go with the Eagles, even though I'm really not confident in this one at all, simply because
No.
they should win. They're expected to win, but I feel dumb for picking them. So we're going to see what happens. We're going to see. I'm going to be validated one way or the other. This is a great way, by the way, to hedge a pick that you're not sure about. I'm going to pick the Eagles, but I know I'm going to feel dumb for it when we get in the show next Thursday.
No. Or you could just pick the Bucks +3 too.
I could, but
Yeah.
do that.
Okay.
One game that I'm more than happy to pick is the Dallas
Oh.
Cowboys and the Green Bay Packers. I mean, no doubt in my mind, Dallas is going to win this game. They've been playing absolutely phenomenally. They kind of came out a little bit sluggish against the Washington Commanders, but then kind of realized, oh wait, we do really well when we're at home. We're like amazing. Look at our home road splits. We should probably win the division, get the second seed, and maybe if things break our way a little bit, the road to the Super Bowl in the NFC is going to be going through Jerry World. Kamen, do you see any path for the Packers to win this game, or do you think this is a good rebuilding year? The Packers have learned some nice things about their young core. They're going to get a little bit of playoff experience and then take that as a building block for next season. Or do you think, Matt LaFleur, a phenomenal coach in his own right, do you think he's going to have anything to do to go up against his predecessor in Green Bay, Mike McCarthy, and say, you know what, we're going to kind of ruin a bunch of Dallas fans' feelings?
Yeah. First off, you want to hear the crazy thing about this game? This is just
Sure.
like, you know what this game features?
What?
The two leading quarterbacks in passing touchdowns in the National Football League. If you told me before the season Dak Prescott
And Jordan Love
would lead the league in passing touchdowns and Jordan Love would be second, I would have went, you're crazy, out of your freaking mind. But this is what this is, Tom.
Yeah.
It's the two touchdown passing leaders in the National Football League, which is, again, it's called Super Wildcard Weekend. I had this statement a few weeks ago. We don't know what's going to happen. And that's the truth. The NFL is so, there's so much parity right now. All these teams are so close. The movie Any Given Sunday, I mean, this is what it is. Or Saturday or Monday with Super Wildcard Weekend. But I mean, you look at the game, it's, on paper, this should be, I've got paper right here. It's a little crumpled up. This is my eye doctor. But anyway, Dallas is 8-0 at home, Tom. There's no other team in the league that is perfect at home or perfect on the road. There's something about Jerry World that really gets Dallas excited. They're not only 8-0 at home. I mean, I know they've had a couple close games. The Lions game was close, but for the most part, they're just clobbering teams at home. They're scoring more than 30 points a game. They're getting shutouts, allowing 5 points, 10 points, whatever. They just feel really, really comfortable at home. Dak Prescott is a different player at home. I think that home field probably, maybe just for this game alone, because Kansas City's got the 2-degree weather. Miami's a warm weather team. Maybe for this game, Kansas City's home field matters the most, but
sure,
for the playoffs as a whole, the home field matters the most for Dallas. And their path to the Super Bowl, Tom, by the way, is if the Rams beat the Lions, then the Rams play the Niners. McVay and Shanahan know each other. The Rams have and can beat the Niners. That's their path. If the Rams can somehow knock out the Niners, then Dallas beats the Rams. Dallas makes the Super Bowl. I don't think they're going to beat San Francisco. I know eventually you're due for something, but if they match up against San Francisco, we've seen this matchup go really, 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 really poorly for them. So they're only, if they play let me put it this way, Tom. They're not losing a home game in Dallas in the playoffs. It's just not going to happen. So depends on if they get lucky, if the Niners get knocked out. So I do like them in this game, although I'm not putting it in locks of the week. I'm not confident enough, but I would actually play Green Bay plus 7.5. I think this is actually going to be a close game. Green Bay does a really good job of, that short passing game, controlling the clock. They play, tight games. I don't think they're going to get blown out in this game. I think this is going to be a one-score game, but I do think Dallas Cowboys do get the W. In the McCarthy is back. By the way, McCarthy, a lot of people have questioned him as a coach, you and I included. And maybe it's Kellen Moore was just really, really bad at his job, as we saw.
Maybe.
He didn't do great with the Chargers either.
Yeah.
But when McCarthy took over play calling duties this year for Dallas, the offense got much better. And their talent got worse, actually. They lost Cooper and Zeke. So maybe Mike McCarthy's a better coach than we're giving him credit for, Tom Casselman. He does have a Super Bowl, and he's got the 2 seed with Dallas this year. I'm not saying he's a top 5 coach in the league, but just maybe he's a top 10 coach in the league, which a lot of folks thought he was bottom 10.
He's having a good year. I mean, I'm going to go with Dallas as well. Like I said, I take opposite of you. I think it'd be a little bit more of a blowout. I mean, I'm not going to let the Packers' last 2 games of the season, a Bears team that really was not well schemed, a Vikings team that was greatly diminished with its offensive weapons, going with a rookie quarterback for most of the way. I'm not going to let those last 2 games disguise the fact that they gave up 30, 34, 24 points in the previous 3 games, 19 to the Chiefs. But like I said, the Chiefs' offense hasn't been outstanding this season. I think that the Packers' defense or offense, or I was right the first time. I think the Packers' defense can be had, and I think on the other side of the ball, the Cowboys play pretty good man-to-man defense, and we haven't seen as much separation or winning on individual routes from the Packers' young receiving core this year. So I tend to think this game's going to be on the other side of that 7-point line. Again, I'm not confident enough to put that in locks, but I think that outcome is just a little bit more likely. So that takes care of Super Wild Card Weekend. We can go pretty quickly to who's going to make the NFC title game, because looking at what we have here, I mean, for me, I've got 3 divisional rematches, as I have Baltimore hosting Cleveland. I have San Francisco hosting Los Angeles with the Rams. I have the Cowboys hosting the Eagles. And then, of course, a game that's going to be a super big inflection point in this continuing rivalry, Buffalo Bills hosting the Kansas City Chiefs. Only difference that we have common is you've got Houston going up against Baltimore. So out of those 4 teams on each side of the bracket, who's making the respective championship games in your mind?
Yeah, I'll start with the NFC. I'm going to be a little bit boring with this one.
I think we both will.
I think we both will. But I mean, you look at, sure, there's question marks. There's always question marks for every team. This is why, I don't really think there's a standout team in the NFL. The question mark for the Niners is Brock Purdy. For Dallas, can they finally deliver in the playoffs? But you just look at like this season and the way these rosters are constructed, those are the 2 best teams in the NFC, bar none. I really think, you look at San Francisco, top 5 offense, top 5 defense. Dallas, when they're playing right, they're in that same ballpark. Both of these teams can get it done on both sides of the ball, and they're both, they have the home field. I look at the rest of the NFC. I mean, Green Bay, no, they're not going to make a run. I mean, the way Philadelphia is struggling so much, sure, they can make a run, but I don't see them putting together 2-3 games in a row. I mean, I think the Bucs we kind of see are not really, they're in the playoffs only because they play in the NFC South. So, I mean, Detroit and the Rams are the other, like, that 3rd and 4th team for me, Tom, that could make a run. But I'm not going to go ahead and pick it. I mean, the Lions have a lot of question marks on defense. Really, the Rams do as well. Their offense looks really good. It's not the same defense. San Francisco and Dallas are, at this current moment, without question, the 2 best teams in the NFC. I mean, look at the Niners. They have the best roster in the league. I know people will say the Ravens, and I know they lost to the Ravens. There was 5 picks in that game. That's part of it. They don't have the best quarterback in the league, but you look at their offensive line, Trent Williams, their defensive line, Bosa, look at their linebacker, Fred Warner, their receivers, Ayuk, Debo. Then you got McCaffrey at running back, Kittle at tight end. This team is so loaded that I think they're going to win. They only got to win 2 games to make the Super Bowl. They got to win 1 game to make the conference championship. Now, Dallas is 8-0 at home. They take care of business. They'll be at home. I got Niners and Cowboys in the NFC title game. the 1 and 2 seeds.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. There's just a pretty clear gap in the tiering of those teams, and it pretty much falls for the most part along the seeding lines. So yeah, I agree with you absolutely that we're going to be seeing San Francisco and Dallas. I think where we're going to have a disagreement is, of course, going to be on the AFC side of things. As
Yeah, of course.
regardless if it's Houston or if it's Cleveland, I like Baltimore. I mean, they've got that extra week of rest. For some players, 2 weeks as they took that last game off to just make sure, we're not going to get anybody banged up. We're not going to shoot ourselves in the foot by risking that sort of
See,
injury
is that too
unnecessarily.
much though? Because I was going to say, like, Kansas City has been there, done that in the playoffs. They got 1 week of rest, but is 2 weeks of rest too much? I don't know, Tom.
I don't necessarily think so. I mean, we're still like a relatively early stage of this new playoff format, and because of the extra playoff, we've got that extra week of football as well, and there's still only one bye week during the regular season. So I kind of think that having, being able to get 2 weeks to rest everybody up, I think that's actually perhaps even more important than it used to be, because there is one more game that you're playing during the season. So there's not enough data to back up that claim. It's just kind of a feel that I'm going off of. I also think that it's, hey, if Lamar goes out and like twists his ankle or something, you're going to look pretty dumb if you're the Baltimore Ravens for letting that happen to your MVP quarterback. So I can't really blame, the Ravens for sitting guys, or the Chiefs, for example. I mean, I know they get to play this week, so it's not a 2 week thing, but I'm always good with keeping your best players healthy, because you need them on the field. That's more important than, okay, do they have a little bit of extra time? So, I mean, I feel really confident with the Ravens, regardless of who they end up playing. I think there's pretty clear a talent gap there.
The Browns beat them this year, though. I will say that.
They did, yeah, but
yeah,
with an extra week of preparation, extra week of rest, I'm going to go with the Ravens over the Browns, and if it's the Texans, the Ravens over the Texans. The Bills and Chiefs is where it gets really, really interesting, because the Chiefs have been a bit of a bugaboo for the Buffalo Bills, but I don't trust anybody in the AFC. Really, I don't really. I trust 3 teams as of right now in the NFL: the Baltimore Ravens, the San Francisco 49ers, and then right below that, Dallas Cowboys. All the other teams, I don't have quite a good feel. Do
you know how many teams I trust, Tom, in the NFL right now?
You're probably going to say 2.
I'm going to say 0.
None.
None. I don't trust anybody in the NFL.
Wow. No,
how could you? Lamar has 1 playoff win. Brock Purdy has 1 playoff win. Who can you trust? You can't trust anybody. There's no one I can sit here. Dallas Cowboys. This isn't 1996, Tom. Come on. There's nobody I trust. I'm picking the Chiefs. Teams. I just don't trust them either, though.
I can trust teams that are outstanding on the season, both on offense and on defense. Okay. And the Ravens, 49ers, and Cowboys all have top 5 offenses and top 5 defenses. Like, that's why I can trust them. That's the only thing I can really base that off of.
Okay.
The team that's next closest to all that, I believe the Bills, 4th in defense, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on offense. So the Bills fall just outside of that. Are you
going by scoring or yardage?
I'm going by scoring, because last time I checked, that's how they determine who wins games.
No, I know, but I'm willing to bet the Chiefs are probably top 5 in yardage. Let me look it up.
Maybe in yardage, but they're 16th in scoring, which is why I'm not going with the Chiefs to make it to the AFC title game. I know that they've got the best quarterback in the NFL. They have, pretty close to the best defense.
They're ninth in yardage, actually, Kansas City.
I mean, which is pretty good, but you got to put the ball in the end zone, and they have not been able to do that. They have been cursed by Matt Nagy, who has seemingly forgotten or maybe never knew how to run offenses or anything like that. But they were able to overcome a quote-unquote lack of receiving talent last season. But, I mean, Travis Kelce's still amazing. He's also a year older. I think he fell shy of 1,000 yards receiving this year because he's banged up with a couple of different injuries, sat out the last game.
And he missed 2 games this year, too. But, yeah.
But even then, like, in previous years, he would have still easily cleared 1,000 yards. Like,
oh yeah,
they're able to move the ball, but as far as being able to put it into the end zone. We've seen, I don't know, at a certain point,
maybe, Tom, is Matt Nagy getting a little bit of responsibility, so to speak, Andy Reid resting his mind for the playoffs? Because you better believe Andy Reid's going to have full. I mean, he already calls the plays. He's the de facto offensive coordinator.
Well, then that means like something
Nagy's
else
kind of a figurehead.
Something else isn't really clicking. Then
was he letting Matt call like some plays and just do too much? Does Andy Reid say, "I'm taking over, step aside, Matthew"?
Maybe.
I'm just saying.
Like maybe that takes place. If so, of course, it would all be behind the scenes because Andy Reid's that type of guy who's not going to bus toss anybody. But
of course,
kind of similar to, like, to a lesser extent, but kind of similar to how it was like, hey, the Eagles are going to figure it out at some point. The Eagles are going to figure it out at some point. They were in the Super Bowl last year, and the Eagles just never reached that point. I think it's fair to call that into question for Kansas City in the offense. We're all assuming, hey, they've got Patrick Mahomes. They're going to put it together on offense.
The Cincinnati game, Tom, they threw the ball down the field, had a lot of success. I know they did have some field goals still. Again, got to finish the drives. Yes. But their offense looked more explosive in that Cincinnati game. And they called some more deep shot passing routes. They went back to some plays they used in 2018, is what Tony Romo said on the broadcast. I'm not saying that one game they figured everything out, but that game was a step in the right direction for me personally.
I know. I'm going with the Bills on this one. They seem to have figured something out since their bye week, 5-0. Didn't look great in some of their matchups. I mean, a close game against the Chargers, a close game against Miami to close out the season. Certainly a lot of mistakes and turnovers in those matchups, but I don't know. I'm gonna go with Buffalo. They've been strong on both sides of the ball. They've been underperforming record-wise relative to some of their advanced metrics. Maybe this is them kind of coming back to that mean, so to speak, regressing positively to the talent that they have. It's going to be it's going to be a fun one. I'm going Buffalo, though, over Kansas City.
Yeah, so first off, I have a lot more question marks about the Baltimore Ravens than anyone out there in the media. Probably, but I am going to pick them to beat the Texans or Browns. So I'll put them in the AFC title game. Just a simple, like, roster talent thing. Because I do think there's going to be some rust for them. I think whoever they play, they're not great in close games. They're not great in, when they get behind. It's not the way they play. But I do think they're going to have just enough to win that first playoff game. So I got the Ravens in the AFC title game. And then the Chiefs-Bills one is going to be, a much harder pick. It could go either way. I'm going to pick the Chiefs for kind of two reasons. And that is, it seems like this is something that if you go over and look at what Buffalo has done the last 4 years, I don't know what it is about that defense, but Buffalo's defense goes into hibernation in the playoffs. You look at the numbers, Josh Allen is performing in these playoff games. He's fifth all-time in passing yards per game in playoff history. He's a really good quarterback. Buffalo plays no defense in the playoffs. I don't know what it is about those guys, if that's like a confidence thing on the defensive players, if those guys just don't have it. Are they guys that, stat pad in the regular season against bad teams? But we see this every single year, Tom. Going into the playoffs, Buffalo is a top 5 offense and a top 5 defense. They never play like it. Kansas City just needs 13 seconds. That's all they need to score on the Buffalo Bills. I have never seen, maybe in the history of the NFL, a team digress so much in the playoffs in one area. The Buffalo defense is going to have to show up in a meaningful playoff game before I trust them one bit. I think they're going to not show up. Meanwhile, what does Kansas City do in the playoffs? They just get that little bit of extra focus. They just tune in a little bit more. They focus in a little bit more. They fine-tune these details a little bit more. Buffalo's beat them in the regular season, Tom. They have. They've had KC's number in the regular season. They have yet to beat the Chiefs in the playoffs. The last 2 times they played in the playoffs, Kansas City won them both. By the way, that Buffalo-Kansas City game, Tom, very interesting, will be, assuming Buffalo wins, assuming Kansas City wins, which, don't assume, nothing is certain. But if that's the case, that'll be Patrick Mahomes' first ever road playoff game. He has never played a road playoff game, which is how dominant have Kansas City been? maybe that's part of it. If you're so good for so many years, it is human nature to have an off year, an off game. They had them this year. They did. It's obvious they had it. Maybe it stops in the postseason, other than the Bengals second half 2 years ago. Again, you're going to have, you play in the playoffs 5-6 years in a row, you're going to have that moment. I know the Bucs game was bad, but I'd almost argue that it was the injuries. People forget that Super Bowl, Kansas City was with 2 starting offensive linemen were out, Tom, and it showed. I don't even think their guys necessarily underperformed. They were just not the better team in that game. But I think, outside of that Bengals second half in the AFC Championship game 2 years ago, Kansas City has been just as clutch as you can be in these games. I mean, the Bucs beat them because the Bucs were better. All these other games where you look at, this is an evenly matched game, either team can win. Kansas City always finds a way. They always do. And you better believe it, they're knocking out the Bills. Give me the Chiefs to knock out Buffalo and that porous postseason defense, Tom. The postseason Bills defense is not the same as the regular season Bills defense. I don't know. Maybe they got to get rid of the defensive coordinator next and improve in that spot. I don't even know who it is, Tom, but they probably got to maybe call Vic Fangio, see if he can flip divisions or something.
Yeah, something along. I don't know the coordinators, but Sean McDermott is from a defensive background, so he's probably the play caller for that. So for the championship games, I've got chalk with the 1-2 seeds on both sides. You've got slightly less chalk with
the 1 and 3,
1 and 3 going in.
Yes.
So for the Super Bowl, I mean, I basically gave my pick away by saying the teams that I trust the most, and of course, it's going to be for me a rematch for the Ravens and the 49ers, albeit a number of years later. With
my senior year of college, 2013.
Yeah, the top 2 teams, the top most consistent teams, especially of late. And I'm not a believer necessarily in previous specific outcomes. So for like Dallas and San Francisco, just because there's a blowout earlier in the year, I think it's going to be a much, much closer game this time around for the Dallas Cowboys on the road. I think it'll be a far more entertaining game.
Yeah.
Simply because, that was fairly early in the season. You learn a lot, you grow a lot, you pick up on some tendencies. And, if we're talking about a chance for an upset, I wonder how much Dallas is going to look at the Baltimore film and see, hey, we've been capitalizing on turnovers. How can we maybe try to create a few more of those opportunities for ourselves on the defensive side of the ball? And likewise, like with talking about the Super Bowl itself, just because I think it's going to be Baltimore and San Francisco, I think that certainly is going to be a close game as well. But I mean, with the extra rest, with the top 5 offense and defense, with the top 2 point differentials in the NFL, I believe they have the top 2 point differentials, which is something when in doubt, that's what I go with. The Baltimore Ravens plus 203. Best in the league, the Cowboys were 194. The 49ers were at 193. Okay, so a point apart for point differential there. That's how close that was for the 49ers and the Cowboys. But home field advantage, a little bit extra rest, a little bit better coaching. I think that the 49ers are just going to edge out over the Dallas Cowboys. I think that the Ravens can pretty handily win. And of course, that means something completely different when we're talking about a championship game against the Buffalo Bills. But I mean, I think that those are the 2 best teams. I think they'll be meeting up in the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah. So first off, Tom, I know you love the DVOA. I love advanced stats too, but I think that's one stat, just my personal take. I could be wrong. We'll find out. But I think that's a stat that you put way too much stock in, because this is the playoffs.
Well, we can go traditional too. We can go with points given up.
That's what I'm saying. No, even point differential. The playoffs are about close games. Baltimore is beaten up on these teams. They will have a close game in the playoffs at some point. San Francisco, Dallas, Kansas City, all these teams, you're not going to go into the playoffs and win 3-4 straight games, by double digits. There's going to be some really, really close games in the playoffs. And maybe those teams with those big point differentials, maybe they don't know how to win the close games. I mean, Baltimore.
I don't buy that.
The Baltimore in recent years, Tom Casselman, in the fourth quarter have been struggle bussing. Their fourth quarter numbers in close games have been really, really bad. They're not a fourth quarter team. They're not a team that gets those gritty type of wins, which is what, by the way, the Kansas City Chiefs do. I know they're doing it a little bit uglier, but they are grinding out some of these wins still. Same for San Francisco. San Francisco hasn't been great in some of these close games. So San Francisco and Dallas, San Fran, I think is a better overall team. They're a little bit better on offense because they're more balanced. You know, both teams can pass the ball. Well, you know, San Francisco has McCaffrey. Dallas has Pollard. Give me the Niners to win that game, owning that series. I got the Niners in the Super Bowl. Then I'm going to stick with my preseason prediction.
Sure.
Just because, Tom, I still have the option to pick it. And like I said, I'm not fully confident in any of these teams. I don't trust anybody in these playoffs. I mean, any one of these teams can win the whole thing or lose their first playoff game. Maybe with the exception of, you know, if Pittsburgh won the whole thing, I'd be shocked. You know, maybe Tampa, maybe Green Bay. There's 3 or 4 teams, you know, that would shock you. But probably about, 6 to 7 teams in these playoffs that I could see having a legitimate chance to win the whole thing. But if you're talking about who do I trust, I don't trust anybody. But who do I maybe trust a little bit? It's the team that's been in 5 straight AFC title games, the Kansas City Chiefs. They've played in 3 of the last 5 Super Bowls. They've won 2 of them. Lamar Jackson, who, by the way, Tom, for me, I would have given my MVP to McCaffrey. And if I would have to go with the quarterback, I would have gone with either Mahomes or Tua. But that's just my pick. Or even Dak. Lamar would be like number 4 or 5 on my quarterback MVP list because, I think the Ravens won because of that incredible defense. I'm not saying Lamar wasn't great. I'm not saying that he's not one of the best players in the league. He is, but no way in heck am I voting Lamar as my MVP. Baltimore got where they were because of their defense and their running game, which Lamar's a big part of that running game. I'm not saying he's not, but it was defense and running. He's the quarterback on a team that ran the ball and they played great defense. He's not top 10 in any passing metrics. Even if you factor in passing and rushing yards combined, passing and rushing touchdowns combined, he's not top 5 in any quarterback stat in the NFL. So I'll tell you that. He's not my MVP personally. And I think it's going to be ironic because Lamar's going to have 2 MVPs. Patrick Mahomes is going to have 2 MVPs. And Pat Mahomes has 2 Super Bowls. And Lamar Jackson has 1 playoff win. Team game. I know it's a team game. Absolutely. But to be that big of a disparity tells you, in my personal opinion, that Lamar Jackson is nowhere near Patrick Mahomes. And in an AFC championship game, who am I going to trust, Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson? You kidding me? I'm going to trust Patrick Mahomes. Give me the Chiefs over the Ravens. Kansas City wins that game. Same thing, Baltimore. They've beaten Kansas City in some regular season games. When it comes to a massive, massive game, playoff atmosphere feel, they haven't gotten over that Kansas City hump either. So give me the Chiefs over the Ravens, the Niners over the Cowboys, and Chiefs and 49ers in the Super Bowl for the Vince Lombardi Trophy.
Well, you're going AFC or NFC then, because we've got the same NFC representative for the Super Bowl. I've got Ravens, you've got Chiefs. So are you going to go for a team that's going to buck a bit of a trend, Kamen? I mean, we have to go all the way back to the year 2015 to find a team that in total scoring was outside of the top 10. That was the Peyton Manning Denver Broncos. Are the Chiefs going to buck that trend all the way to winning the Super Bowl, or does San Francisco get the edge on a little bit of a different rematch between the two teams, this time with San Francisco coming out on top?
Got my Chiefs red on over here. I'll be wearing my Chief jerseys in the coming weeks.
San Francisco red.
Chiefs red. I've got the Chiefs football right there. I'm picking the Chiefs.
Wow.
It's just a whole 2-week thing. I think San Francisco has a better roster, Tom. If they played this game 100 times, I think San Francisco wins 55 to 60 of them. I really do. I think they're a better overall team than Kansas City. But with it being a 1-game scenario, you give 2 weeks to Andy Reid, you give 2 weeks to Patrick Mahomes. Brock Purdy, that Raven game really made me question him a little bit. It's just human nature. I mean, I think, like, I've been big on Purdy on this show. You've heard me say it all the time. He's better than people are giving him credit for, Brock Purdy. But can he do it 3 straight games in a row? Can he do it in that pressure moment? Because I've already seen Mahomes do it. He's got 2 MVPs in the Super Bowl. He's got 2 MVPs, 2 Super Bowl rings. I've seen him do it. It just comes down to a trust thing. And that's the same thing, by the way. The reason why I'm picking the Chiefs is Patrick Mahomes. I trust him more than any player in the NFL. By the way, can you name how many Super Bowl winning quarterbacks are currently in these playoffs? Just go ahead and name them.
I think it's Patrick Mahomes, the only one.
No, there's 2 others.
Oh, well, there's Stafford.
Yes.
And then it wasn't Goff. Flacco.
So yeah. Flacco is old. Stafford is old.
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes is still in the prime of his career. I mean, I guess I'm the type of guy that you got to prove it to me. You got to knock that guy off the mountaintop. And it seems like every year, you know, anytime Mahomes has a little bit of a semblance of being human, then he shows us that he's Patrick Mahomes. I think this season, again, his numbers, Tom, if you take out all the drops that they had, I mean, heck, even touchdown drops, if Kansas City caught as many balls as they needed to, Mahomes likely is the NFL leader in passing touchdowns this year. Like, he was not that far off that mark. If he plays all 17 games and they catch the ball, so many of these touchdown drops coming at the end of drives, you know. But I think he's kind of taking it personally, because I think a lot of folks are taking this Kansas City's offense is struggling, which, again, they're top 10 in total offense, just to clarify for the 50th time. They're taking this whole thing, Kansas City's offense is struggling. It must be Patrick Mahomes' fault. I'm not saying everyone's doing that, but some people are. And you poke the bear. The bear comes out. I mean, Mahomes is kind of like Michael Jordan, Michael Phelps. These 2 guys, whenever you started talking, they listen and they respond. I mean, it's the same thing. You never trash talk Michael Jordan. You never trash talk Michael Phelps. These guys in the clutch moments, they have that extra, a little something in them that these other guys don't have. I'm going to bank on that little something Patty Mahomes has that none of these other guys in the NFL have. None of these guys. I mean, I haven't seen these guys do it, Tom. I got to see Lamar Jackson show me that he's got that thing in him, because he doesn't have it, Tom. Now, he might get it, but until he does get it, I'm going with the guy that's got that it factor, Patty Mahomes.
All right. Well, I am going to go with the Baltimore Ravens on this one. And, you know, I'm going to go with Lamar Jackson continuing to play really well. I'm going to go with an overall really good team in the Baltimore Ravens that have overcome a lot of adversity this season and have adjusted to a number of injuries. I mean, in particular, their probably most important receiving weapon in Mark Andrews. They've been able to overcome that with Isaiah Likely at tight end. It's a team that's really well coached on both sides of the ball. John Harbaugh has been fantastic. When we talk about, you know, it factors and winning gritty games and everything, I mean, that is Baltimore's DNA, winning games with defense, with running, and not forcing necessarily Lamar to be a superhuman quarterback in order to win a Super Bowl. I think that the Ravens are in a pretty good spot as far as being as healthy as they can be at this point. I think there's some like outside chance maybe Mark Andrews has recovered enough. I haven't heard any recent update. I know that was something that they were holding out hope on when he had that operation early in the season. I'm not counting on that in any form or fashion. But I mean, this is a team that went up against the San Francisco team that was rolling pretty well and knocked them right in the mouth. And that's the type of team, that's the type of attitude that the Baltimore Ravens are going to bring if we want to talk about the intangibles and not even necessarily touch on the fact that, like I said, top 5 offense and defense this season. I think we're going to go in for a really tough matchup between 2 really balanced teams that rely on a strong run game, that rely and scheming for open receivers for their passing game, and really good defense in the Ravens and the 49ers. I think it's going to be basically like close to like a WWE type of matchup where it's going to be a little bit gritty. It's going to be a little bit ugly. It's going to be quintessential football in that respect. And I think it's going to be a close matchup, but I'm going to go with a slight edge to the Baltimore Ravens on this one. I think as far as teams playing as well as they can play, Baltimore's been the one that's been doing that the most of this season. I mean, going to take out that last week. I mean, if you want to count that as a quote unquote loss, but they had locked up the one seed. They weren't necessarily going for a win, so to speak, in that week. If they needed the win, I think they would have gotten it, quite frankly, against that Pittsburgh Steelers team. So, I like both teams that have the bye week in their respective conference, that have the home field advantage in their respective conference, and have been playing pretty well pretty much the entire season. Slight edge to Baltimore because I think Lamar Jackson is a better quarterback than Brock Purdy. And we'll have to see if San Francisco is able to respond to the type of performance that they had where Sam Darnold ended up closing out the game. If he's closing out the Super Bowl, things have gone really, really wrong for San Fran.
Oh, really right, if they're up enough. But yeah, probably more likely the other one.
Yeah, because like even if you're up a lot in the Super Bowl, you still leave your guys in for that one. You're not saving them for anything else. So yeah, it's going to be a fantastic playoffs. It kicks off this Saturday, 3:30 Central Time, with the Texans and Browns, followed up by Chiefs and Dolphins on Saturday night. It's going to be a fantastic week. It's been a hectic week as well, as we've had a bunch of coaching news come, and this has been a new addition to our rundown that you sent out early in the week. We haven't actually added all the news that there is, but we'll recap three, I'd say actually four big coaching things that have gone on. Of course, the biggest one, Nick Saban retiring from Alabama, a move that it's surprising, but not shocking necessarily, given the fact that he's 72 years old and the Alabama fan base is absolutely stark raving crazy. I don't blame him for retiring at all. We've got the Patriots, the news of today, the Patriots parting ways with Bill Belichick. Amicably, mutually. Yesterday, that was the news for Pete Carroll and the Seattle Seahawks. And then, of course, on Tuesday, the Titans firing Mike Vrabel. And I think that's significant because Vrabel had led the Titans to, 4 straight AFC South division titles, taking them to an AFC championship game. And in a year where your veteran quarterback is injured and you're starting a second-round rookie quarterback, a lot of things going on after you've traded, a couple years after you've traded your star wide receiver in A.J. Brown, and the guy that you picked to replace him hasn't really been panning out. I guess the Titans decided that Mike Vrabel was the problem and responsible for all those different things, despite, in my opinion, overachieving. I mean, when was the last time I picked the Titans to win anything?
Right.
But I've always said, I'm probably dumb for picking against them because Mike Vrabel is just that level of football coach. He's available. So, Kamen, we'll talk about, some legacy with Nick Saban because he's retiring. If you want to kind of touch on really quickly possible next moves for Carroll, Belichick, Vrabel, we can get into that as well. Maybe one of them should replace him in Alabama if they want to,
or Vrabel could go to New England, former Patriot.
That's a lot better of a move. I think the Alabama job is absolutely terrible. I wouldn't personally.
There's so much pressure at the Alabama job. I know there's pressure in NFL jobs, but there is not the same type of pressure as the SEC, coaching job, especially Alabama. I'd argue with you in some ways that's the best job in all of football, whether it's college or NFL, and in some ways the worst. Because I think you get set up with all those great recruits and you're part of a great program. But at Alabama, if you don't make the playoff at least, that's a bad season. Like if you're not
a championship,
if
you make it to the playoff,
and lose, bad season.
That's still a bad season. That's still a bad season.
You make the playoffs in the NFL, that's still a good season. So yeah, real quick, I'm just gonna hit on the Vrabel one just real quickly, just because again, I agree with you. It's a significant move. I know Arthur Smith got fired, other guys did. Yeah. I just want to keep this to the point of the big dogs. I'll address the Vrabel thing real quickly. Just simply put, Tennessee is not a top 10 team talent-wise. Even the year they made the AFC Championship, they weren't top 10 that year. Mike Vrabel is absolutely a top 10 coach. I was going to say they're not going to do better. The only way they could possibly do better is because Belichick and Pete Carroll, I don't think he's going to go there. Harbaugh as well may go to the NFL.
Yeah.
That's the only scenario where this might be a rare case where there's a slight chance to do better. But if you're Belichick, if you're Pete Carroll, if you're Harbaugh with the pedigree you have, you're not going to go coach the Tennessee Titans.
No.
So they're not getting those guys. So they will not do better than Mike Vrabel. That much is clear in Tennessee. As far as the other guys, I mean, these are just some of the best coaches in the history of not only football, but sports. They're all Hall of Famers. Mm-hmm. I mean, Belichick has 6 Super Bowl championships. That is the most in NFL history. We can sit here and debate, is he the best coach ever? I know Don Shula's got a little bit more wins. You could argue Andy Reid, of course. There's the whole thing of Belichick and Brady. Who's more important? Even if you're going to say Brady's more important, which, by the way, I agree with that. If I have to pick Brady or Belichick, okay, Brady's more important, but who cares? It's a team game. Like, we're not going to diminish, Belichick for having Tom Brady. I mean, he won 6 Super Bowls, and he's the one that picked that team as the general manager. And you look at Tom Brady's first 3 Super Bowls, he wasn't even the main reason they won. It was the defense. It was New England's defense, which was picked and coached by who? I mean, that's what I would argue. You look at the Belichick and Brady, like, okay, Brady's better without Belichick than Belichick is without Brady. But I'd argue with you, the first 3 Super Bowls, Belichick was more important. The last 3 Super Bowls, Brady was more important. But 6 Super Bowl rings, I don't think that record will ever be touched in the National Football League. And we know it's all about winning. I mean, it's tough. Shula's great. Obviously, Andy Reid is great now. George Halas, Tom Landry, Vince Lombardi, a lot of great coaches. Reid has that chance to pass him up. But right now, if I'm picking the best coach ever, it's Bill Belichick. He's got the 6 rings. That's all you need to know. Mic drop, walk out of the room. Belichick has those rings. And I think he might benefit from a new situation. We'll see if he wants to keep going, if he's done. I think it's 50-50, Tom. He didn't say he's retiring, so I think he's kind of keeping his eyes open what might be out there. But, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Bill Belichick, but maybe that's just who he wants to be, that grumpy, that Sith Lord personality with the media. I have heard he does a lot of good stuff off the field. He does crack jokes sometimes. Yeah. And his last post-game conference today, I don't know if you caught the Tim Tebow tidbit.
Yes.
He said there hasn't been this many media members since we signed Tim Tebow. That gave me a nice little chuckle. So maybe he's going to be better, off the, after his career as a personality. But I mean, whether you put Belichick as your best coach ever, which I do, if you put him 2, if you put him 3, he's one of the best ever at what he's done in the history of the league. Got to give him all the credit. And whether he comes back or not really doesn't matter. His legacy is cemented. I'll hit on Nick Saban third, because I'm going to save, for me, the best for last. Maybe I'm crazy, but I think Nick Saban's even bigger deal than Belichick. But Pete Carroll, I think, is the one. Poor Pete Carroll, almost like getting, because that was the early news yesterday. Pete Carroll was the big lead story. Then it goes Nick Saban, then it goes Bill Belichick. And this guy's, almost getting shoved under the rug. In the history of football, Tom, there is 3 coaches ever that have won a Super Bowl and a college football national championship. Pete Carroll is one of 3. I think there's one other guy that won an NFL championship and a national title, but that was pre the Super Bowl era. So I think it's 4 total have won 1 and 1 at least, and 3 in the Super Bowl era. And he almost had 2 and 2. And you can argue those were self-inflicted. The passing the ball with Russell Wilson on the 1-yard line, the give it to Lendale White instead of Reggie Bush in the college national title game. But it is very hard to succeed at both levels. And believe it or not, that's something that Nick Saban actually didn't do. Although I would argue with you, he only had 2 years in Miami. Give him more time, he probably would have figured it out. But Pete Carroll did it at both levels, gets a lot of credit. And of the guys, he's probably the guy that's probably not done. He's also 72, by the way. Pete Carroll looks good. He looks young. He's throwing that ball out there in practice. He looks cool, man. I like Pete Carroll. But, lastly for me, Nick Saban, and I'm going to have two questions for you first, Tom. I'm going to just go ahead and answer them myself. Then I'd love to hear your take on all this. I know I'm talking a lot, but this is exciting. But first off, I'm going to start with Nick Saban. I'm going to go ahead and say this statement because I think the best coach ever might be Phil Jackson for me in sports history. Maybe I'm biased as a Bulls fan, but I think Nick Saban is the greatest football coach that has ever walked this earth, ahead of Bill Belichick, ahead of Landry Lombardi, all those guys. I think what he has done in Alabama is the single most impressive coaching job in the history of coaching that we have seen probably anywhere, maybe the exception of Phil Jackson. But look, this is his run at Alabama. 17 years, Tom, at Alabama. He won 6 national championships. That means there's a better than a 1 in 3 chance he's going to win the national title. He coached in 9 out of 17 national championship games. That means there's a better than 50% chance Alabama's either in the national title, winning it, or playing in it. And by the way, 2 of those other years, they were in the college football semis where they lost to the eventual champion anyway. Here is his records at Alabama, by the way. Now, Bama's a historic program, but Bama was not Bama before he got there because they were great with Bear Bryant. And then they kind of disappeared for a while. They kind of, quite frankly, came off the face of the map when it comes to college football, great programs. And he built them back up. His first year at Alabama, Nick Saban was 7-6. You want to hear the records the rest of the way, Tom? This is shocking. I mean, this is so impressive. The least wins he got, he never failed to get double-digit wins after his first year. Year 2, 12-2. Year 3, 14-0 BCS national champ. The next year, 10-3. The next year, 12-1 BCS national champ. The next year, 13-1 BCS national champ. 11-2, 12-2, 14-1 CFP national champ. 14-1, 13-1 national champ. 14-1. I think they lost the title that year. 11-2, 13-0 national champ. 13-2, 11-2, 12-2. He is losing either 0, 1, or 2 games. After his first season in Alabama, Tom, he lost more than 2 games just once.
Yeah.
I get that it's a little bit easier for him in college. I get that he gets those recruits. He's got that recruiting base. I know it's easier for him to do that than it is for Bill Belichick, Andy Reid in the NFL. It is easier, but that winning run, that stretch, that success, keep this in mind, everybody's gunning for Alabama. Every team that plays Alabama every single year, that is their Super Bowl. And you want to point to something that's impressive? His record against his assistants, the guys that know him best, brilliant football minds. Kirby Smart, Jimbo Fisher, Steve Sarkisian, Dabo Sweeney. I mean, we can go look at that coaching tree, by the way. Lane Kiffin. I think he's lost twice to his assistants. Once to Kirby Smart, who, by the way, he completely owns. Kirby Smart has 2 national championships. Georgia has 2 losses the last 3 years, both of them to Alabama. I think Saban's something like 3-1 against Georgia, something like that since Kirby Smart took over. And then Steve Sarkisian finally got him this year, earlier this season. But, even those great assistants can't beat the mentor versus mentee. So my 2 questions for you, Tom.
Sure.
So first off, I think he's the best college coach ever. He's got 7 national championships. Bear Bryant has 6. Saban won 6 at Bama. Bear Bryant won 6. Then Saban won the 1 at LSU. I just look at what he did at Alabama. You look at all the NFL talent he produced, too. I mean, we're talking guys like, Tua, Jalen Hurts, Derrick Henry, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Will Anderson Jr., Julio Jones. I mean, Minka Fitzpatrick, offense, defense, every position on the football field. AJ, okay, well, maybe not AJ McCarron, but so many great players. and you can really tell that man just gets football. Mm-hmm. So my answer is he is the greatest college coach of all time. Then my second question is, we're talking about Bill Belichick and Nick Saban, who, by the way, Saban was a defensive coordinator under Belichick for the Cleveland Browns. I saw something online that said even the two best coaches couldn't save Cleveland, but maybe Flacco can. But go figure. So my two-part question is Nick Saban the best college coach ever? Is Bill Belichick the best pro coach ever? And who's greater in their career, Belichick or Saban? I lean Saban because I think his dominance has been greater. I will acknowledge that it's a little bit easier to dominate in the college game than the pro game. But, I mean, as good as Belichick was, he did have Brady. You know, they would lose, 3, 4, 5 games. Nick Saban was losing 1, 2, or 0 every year. So I got to say Nick Saban for me is the best coach of all time when it comes to football, the best college coach. I put Belichick as the NFL GOAT, but I don't put him greater than Nick Saban for me personally, because there's just something about Alabama football. You just fear Bama. It's just something that you just don't really do with any other team, for a span of 17 years, Tom. Because New England Patriots had the 3 championships. Then they went like 7, 8 years without winning. Then they won again. Alabama didn't go 7, 8 years without winning a championship with Nick Saban. They go 2 years without winning one. Your heads are spinning, right? So I'll go Saban as the GOAT for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go Saban as the best college coach. I mean, looking at what he was able to do, and it goes beyond just straight up like wins and championships. I mean, you look at the guys he was able to get to the NFL, particularly first round picks. It's not really a close mark between him and other coaches as far as getting guys to the next stage of their career. Which, if we're going to talk like big picture about college in general, isn't about setting you up for your next professional steps.
Sure.
You could argue Nick Saban did that better than any other coach in college football. I'll stop short of saying Saban over Belichick simply because with the NFL, you've got so many more factors because you've got a salary cap. You have a draft determining how you get, fresh players into the league and where they end up playing. You have a full playoff system for going throughout your postseason as opposed to in a championship game, especially before the college football playoff. It was, okay, who's the top 2 ranked teams they face each other? There's not really a whole lot of chance for variance. And good on Alabama and Nick Saban for winning a majority of those games, taking advantage of those opportunities. But I'm going to say I would pick Belichick if I had to say which one is the better football coach type of thing. But the two sports are just so wildly, vastly different because you talk about all those great seasons that Alabama had. On the one hand, yes, they played in the SEC, which is by and large the best conference. But how many cupcake games do they schedule? Do they play?
Yeah, but how many cupcake games do the Patriots have in the AFC East, though? All those years?
Not a lot.
That was a really bad division.
This came out when Alex Smith was firing back at Tom Brady. The AFC, when you compare that division to the others, was actually not that bad of a division. It wasn't the worst division, even when you stripped away.
So when's the last time the Jets won the Super Bowl? Joe Namath?
Well, it wasn't based on. Well, yeah, for the Jets,
Miami was like Bob Greasy and the Bills.
Yeah, but if we're looking at regular season, I mean, first off, the NFL in general is fairly dynastic when we look at the chunks of kind of like dynastic teams that won. This is the first year I just saw it on Twitter. This is the first year since 1998 we've had an NFL playoff without Peyton Manning or Tom Brady.
Right.
So it's a little bit different in that picture, but as far as like the overall record of teams within the division, the AFC East wasn't the worst division. It was actually, I think, without the Patriot games, they were still above 500 or something along those lines compared to other divisions.
I think I look at the SEC though. I mean, look at the best teams in college football, like year in, year out, LSU, Georgia, Florida. I think Alabama and Nick Saban had a lot more competition, both for recruits and for, success. The Patriots didn't really have that same competition. It was Colts and Steelers in the conference, sort of. But in that division, within their own division, I think in some ways, I know, like I said, it's a little bit easier to get a super team in college, but I think Alabama had more tough competition for me than the Patriots did in that AFC East. And you can pull out the records all you want, but I actually agreed with Alex Smith's piece. I'm not saying, again, Brady and Belichick are unbelievable. They're the best ever at what they do. But I kind of agreed with what he said about the strength of the AFC East and how it was just well set up for New England for me, Tom. Like, you look at Miami, Buffalo, and the Jets, like, they're not bad football teams.
Record-wise, they're not like, the worst division.
But, like, they're not terrible teams, but they're not, like right now, the East is great. Of course, you know, if we're talking about right now, Buffalo, Miami's up, the Jets are up. But if you look at, like, during Tom Brady's run, those teams were never really Super Bowl contenders. Like you know, like, you look at the AFC North for
how many?
In large part,
I'll put it this way: how many national contenders did Alabama face throughout each of their seasons? Like maybe one or two a year. If we're going to be comparing it,
every year.
Well, and so did the Patriots throughout their season.
Not every year. They didn't play the Colts every year. And then if we want to do that,
we're going to talk about, okay, the Patriots had to play how many other teams in different divisions and different conferences compared to what Alabama had to play in different divisions and different conferences.
They had the home field every year. Alabama had to go and play at LSU, at Auburn, at all these SEC stadiums. I think they had more competition than Patriots did for me.
Okay, which team played more NFL players type of thing? Like the NFL is just a completely different game from college football on who you're facing week in, week out with that type of thing. So that's why I don't say a Bill Belichick. I don't say it lightly, but I just think that the pro game is at a different level, and that that Belichick a little bit better at the pro level.
See, the reason why I like Nick Saban a little bit more, Tom, for me, is
I mean, you could like him, but
I mean, he's more adaptable to me because Nick Saban came in as a defensive coach, but he was always really good about getting offensive linemen running the ball. Then he adapted. He saw that the college game was changing. All of a sudden, he went after the top quarterbacks, the top receivers, and he's able to identify. I know it's not just him. There's other coaches, other recruiters, but he's the head of the program, and he was able to identify, and he was able to pick, what do I need now? This game is changing. We're going away from, let's play defense and run the ball. We're going to the spread offenses. I need to get guys who can catch the ball.
With Tom Brady. Look at how the Patriots evolved. They did the same thing.
Somewhat. He's not evolving late in his career, Tom. That's where I would argue maybe there's a slight difference later in his career. He always had Gronk, but I mean, have the Patriots gotten those explosive receivers in recent years? No. I don't know. I'm more of a Nick Saban guy.
They're different games. That's why I'm saying.
They are different games, apples and oranges, but I'm on the Nick Saban greater coach than Bill Belichick side for me.
All right. You absolutely can do that. Talking about, do we want to get into who we think might replace Nick Saban? I think that's a little bit far afield.
Real quick, both guys, just throw some names out there. I think the guy that should replace him with, I don't know if it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's going to move, if he's going to. But I like Steve Sarkisian. A lot of guys will go Dabo Swinney. Again, both of these guys were assistants with Nick Saban. Both of them are great coaches. I know Dabo Swinney's not been the best with the transfer portal. I know a lot of this is the whole recruiting game thing, the NAI or NLI. I always get it mixed up.
NIL.
NIL, that's it. NIL.
Name, image, likeness.
Name, image, and likeness. Dabo Swinney has not really adjusted well to that. That's why we've seen Clemson go from, with Bama, Georgia, Ohio State. They were like a top, 3-4 program. And since this new stuff came on, they've kind of struggled a little bit. I mean, how much of that is losing Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne? I don't know. But I think Steve Sarkisian in that recruiting climate, he's been an assistant at Bama. He's a coach at Texas, knows how to get those big name recruits. Obviously, I think a lot of folks are saying Kirby Smart, but I don't think Kirby Smart should leave because Georgia actually has had the best recruiting class, even ahead of Bama the last few years. Kirby Smart's a Georgia alum. He's got too much good going for him and too much to lose. Like if he leaves Georgia and doesn't succeed, Georgia and Bama can hate him. Maybe he cares, maybe he doesn't. I just I think Kirby Smart is in the best spot right now with Georgia, because if they
Mhm.
can get Kirby Smart, that's the guy to get. 100%. You better believe they're going to call him. Well, let's see if he answers. So Kirby Smart is like your dream target. My one that I would go after that I think is a little bit more realistic, or is it though? Is Texas back? I don't know. They beat Bama this year, but I think Steve Sarkisian would be definitely a good bet for Alabama.
All I know is that I'm going to think twice about taking the Alabama job. I know it's going to be a huge mountain to climb, but this isn't like Jim Harbaugh taking on the Michigan job, or even really like Brian Kelly going to LSU. Alabama is probably the one program where you're on the hot seat if you don't win a national championship. I mean, Crimson Tide fans got absolutely spoiled with Nick Saban and the run that that they were able to go on. I think that regardless of who I get, and I'm not super duper plugged in on college football simply because it's not as much of my bag. But I think these other coaches that we're talking about are in such good situations now that they know, even though going to Alabama is going to be kind of like an upgrade as far as like, hey, this is the best, highest expectation program, you're going in with like almost unrealistic expectations in
I
my
think they're going to
opinion.
get one of those high profile guys, though, because there's about five or
Maybe.
six. Lane Kiffin's another one, by the way. I know we had those moments in Tennessee, but he's got his career really resurrected the right way at Ole
At Ole
Miss.
Miss, yeah.
So
Yeah, I'd
I
say, yeah,
think
it almost has to
I
be a former Alabama person
exactly.
like Kiffin or Sarkisian. I don't think Kirby Smart, because I think he's in too good of a spot. I mean, he's basically a college football playoff committee decision away from having another championship this year himself.
He's also the top dog right now. I mean, Nick
Yeah,
Saban
like there's
retiring,
no
you
reason
know,
for him to move.
Kirby Smart goes from like that, like
Yeah,
he was pushing Saban, and now he's like, I'm top dog. All you
yeah.
guys, listen up.
Well, and also like from a pure like coaching survival political place, I think it might be a little bit challenging to get Lane Kiffin or Steve Sarkisian because like you said earlier, everybody's gunning for Alabama. I think these guys are going to say, hey, if I can go out and beat Alabama,
Lane Kiffin, by the way,
then
Tom,
I'm going to get an extension in
I
Texas
know
or
you're
in
not
Mississippi or
as
whatever.
plugged in
Yeah,
as you say you are, but Lane Kiffin right now has assembled an incredible recruiting class at Ole Miss, and
don't risk
that
losing that.
they're going
Yeah,
to target him so they can take all his recruits. Because the interesting story about Nick Saban, when he got hired at Alabama, he asked the president or whatever, "Do you think you got the best coach in the country?" And the guy said, "Yes, I think we did." He's like, I'm not sure if I'm the best coach or not, but I'm 100% sure I'm the best recruiter. And
yeah,
Nick Saban is a recruiting mastermind. And if Lane Kiffin has gotten to that point with recruiting, if he's doing that good at Ole Miss, what can he do at Alabama? I think it's
yeah.
going to be a big name, though. I don't think it's going to be an up and coming coach because it's Alabama. You got to have the resume. You got to
Mm-hmm.
have that, I know they're looking at Mike Norvell from Florida State as well. He would make that fan base
James
even more
Franklin
upset.
from Penn State.
Yeah. Even James
Oh
Franklin, though. James Franklin probably doesn't have enough of a resume. I mean, maybe even Lane
no,
Kiffin doesn't, but he's got at least the ties in the recruiting base. Because I look at
yeah,
some of these guys, I think they're going to look at a guy that recruits against the SEC, whether it's an SEC school or somebody like an SEC school. They're going to want to get someone with that recruiting pedigree that knows how to go into these homes and get these kids. The outside crazy candidate, which is not going to happen, but it would be Deion Sanders because he knows how to recruit. That would be the really like, oh my God, we went against the grain,
mm-hmm.
hot splash. But that's just, I haven't heard that anywhere. That's just a Kamen Entchev, like
Yeah. No,
fun hypothetical scenario.
I think for any of the big names, call them in a year or two after whoever took the job and hasn't won a title and got rode out of town on a rail, tarred and feathered. That's when you take the call if you're kind of like that top person. You don't want to step right into the shadow
I know
of Nick
Oregon's
Saban.
coach
So
is a guy they're looking at, and he said
he
he's
said he's
staying at
staying.
Oregon. But
Because I think
again,
he's like looking
supposedly,
at that and saying,
Mizzou's defensive coordinator said he was staying at Mizzou also. Then LSU gave him the money, and then he
that's
changed
the
his
other thing.
mind.
Money
So
does talk. So
we'll see, Tom.
yeah,
We'll see.
Alabama not the only program with a little bit of mystery. The Michigan Wolverines riding high as the alum, the Michigan man, Jim Harbaugh finally got his team the title. He's accomplished pretty much everything that you can accomplish at the college football level, which is why a lot of folks are suspecting that he might go to the NFL in addition to a little bit of an NCAA probe against that sign stealing scandal. But as a quick recap of this Wolverines Huskies game that we witnessed on Monday night, I mean, quite frankly, I picked the Huskies to win because I thought, hey, they've got this potentially explosive offense with NFL quarterback, NFL caliber wide receivers. But what we saw was, at long last, a team that actually could capitalize on and convert on Washington's weakness, which was mainly the run game. I mean, we're looking at a quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, for the Wolverines, who attempted 18 passes for 140 yards.
Yep.
10 completions, no touchdowns. That was all courtesy Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, bookending the game with a couple rushing scores. I believe Edwards had the first two of the game that kind of put a little bit of distance. Then Washington, held tough for a couple of quarters before Blake Corum said, "You know what? Time to
win Kamen some money. Hit the parlay.
So
hit the parlay, Blake Corum. Hit the parlay, baby."
Yeah, so this is the not to the same extent, but this is the second year in a row where not necessarily a compelling finish to the college football season with the championship matchup, but credit to Washington for keeping it a little bit close. They just simply were not able to get their own run game going, and Michigan was able to negate the passing game. I thought it would be a little bit closer, obviously, than what it ended up being. I'm a bit surprised that Washington was only able to put one touchdown up on the board. But this is the type of thing where my question for Michigan all season, and they answered it, was, hey, what are you going to do against actual good offenses? Because you're playing in a down year in the Big Ten. You didn't have any really big non-conference games or anything like that. And Michigan just said, okay, we're going to stop up an Alabama team that isn't the best Alabama team we've seen. It was pretty decent. I mean, good enough to make a college football playoff, good enough to win the SEC title game, and then do the same thing to the Pac-12 champion in the last year of that conference. So I don't know if there's any other notes you want to add to that comment or any other insights that you have on the game, but it was pretty much just start to finish Michigan winning their brand of football.
Yeah, I'm pumped. I won a lot of money on that game, Tom. So that was fun. I mean, I think this was an year where we didn't have a truly great college football team. You look at the last, 5-6 national champions. We've had some, historic teams. The LSU team with Joe Burrow, that Georgia team with all that defensive talent in the NFL that won the back-to-back titles. I mean, we had Bama and Clemson had all those great teams the years they won. I think that, you look at how do you win the national championship? I mean, for the most part, these teams have been loaded on offense, defense, run, pass the ball. Michigan was pretty simple. We're going to beat you with the great defense, number one defense in the country, and we're going to run the ball. We're going to win with the defensive line, the offensive line, old school football. In the history of the CFP, Tom, there's been 4 running backs that have had 100-plus rushing yards and 2+ touchdowns in the CFP national championship game. 2 of the 4 were by Michigan in this game. Both of their running backs, Corum and Edwards, 100+ with 2+ touchdowns. The other 2, by the way, Derrick Henry and then Zeke Elliott. Go figure. So they won easily in that game. As for Harbaugh, I think he's headed to the NFL. I'm hoping it's with the Chicago Bears, but it can't happen anymore because they're keeping Eberflus. I think it's going to be the Chargers. I think he's looking at Justin Herbert. I also think that Bill Belichick might be at the Chargers. I would say the Chargers coach next year would be either Jim Harbaugh or Bill Belichick is my prediction for the Chargers. And if those guys can't get San Diego, out of their funk, then the Charger organization is actually physically cursed. So that's all I got to say about that. But back to that whole point about Saban, who's the best coach? Harbaugh is a brilliant coach. It took a lot for him to get one national title. So that's why Saban 7 is ever more impressive. But hats off to Michigan. They were the best football team this year. They shut up a lot of doubters. So good on the Wolverines.
Absolutely. Moving on to locks of the week, as you said at the top of the show, Kamen, 5-1 week for us. Just breathing through mine to the recap really quick. I actually deleted all of my picks. I know that I missed on the Bears one. I believe I hit on Cardinals. Or no, that Cardinals Eagles was 2 weeks ago. I'll let you go with that. You
got Bucks -4.5 at the Panthers.
That was one.
They won 9-0. You had Bills -3 over the Dolphins. They won 21-14. And you had the Bears +3. They lost by 8. You were 2-1. I also had the Bills -3. They beat the Dolphins by 7. Steelers -3.5 over the Ravens. They won 17-10. And I had the Texans -1.5 over the Colts. Texans winning by 4. So what do we got this week, Tom? I think we can do this again. Let's keep the hot trend going. Let's be positive. Why stop at 5-1? We can go 6-0, baby. Unless you disagree with one of my picks. I don't think we'll be flipping, though.
We'll see. I mean, I said Rams to win outright. I'll take them +3 on the spread there against the Lions. If you wanted to go plus money, you could pick them. I believe it's like 150 +150, something like that. -110 on the line, though, so not terrible there. I typically am wary of double-digit spreads, but I will take the Bills -10 over the Steelers. There's just nothing remarkable about the Steelers now that TJ Watt is out. I mean, the one remarkable factor is Mike Tomlin, but coaching only goes so far. When there's that big a talent disparity on both ends of the ball, I got to go with the Bills on that one. And then Dolphins Chiefs. You're not going to like this one, Kamen. I'm going under 43.5 points. I think that this game is going to be just an unpleasant experience. I think that with a cold, hard field, speed is going to be a little less of a factor. And I think that the Chiefs are going to do enough on defense to hold the Miami offense down. And like I said, the Chiefs offense hasn't been spectacular, even with the diminished Dolphins pass rush. I think this is going to be a game that just ends up going under 43.5 on Saturday night. It's going to be a get a little bit of a lead and get out of here onto the next round.
All right. So this is either going to be an incredible week in betting locks of the week or absolutely horrendous. I think you and I often agree. I've never seen us pick 2 exact lines. We're going together. We're riding, baby. We're on the bus, the Casselman and Kamen bus. Let's tail. Let's ride, baby. It's not Bronco country. It's betting locks of the week. I've got the Rams +3 at the Lions as well. Rams offense is going to take advantage of that bad Lions defense. Stafford returns to Detroit in a winning fashion. I also think the Rams win outright. So the +3 points makes me feel good. Hupp, Nakua, Stafford, great quarterback, great receivers, bad Lions secondary. That playoff experience of winning the Super Bowl 2 years ago is going to pay off for the Rams. They should win outright, but with +3, I feel really good about it. So I like that one for the Rams. Then also, same as you, Tom, Bills -10 over the Steelers. Got the exact same thing. The Steelers are 1-10 without TJ Watt in the lineup since he's debuted. You look at Pittsburgh's offense, you look at Buffalo's offense, you look at the firepower that Buffalo has and the lack of firepower Pittsburgh has. I mean, just look at the quarterback spot. Mason Rudolph, by the way, is better than Pickett, better than Trubisky, but it's Mason Rudolph and then it's Josh Allen. I mean, it's a pretty massive difference. It just, I mean, again, Buffalo could get some turnovers. This could end up being spooky, but just based on talent, you know, the home field as well for Buffalo, I think the Bills win easily in this one. And then we even picked the third game. We picked the exact same game to bet on. I actually, for the record, Tom, I'm not confident enough on the over-under just because of the bad weather. I'm going to lean the under. I do think you'll go 3-0, but there is a lot of offensive talent on the field that I could see like a 24-20 game. So I'm not going with the under. You probably know where I'm headed here. That is the Chiefs -4.5 in this game. The Dolphins are miserable in cold weather games when it's less than 40 degrees. This one is supposed to be 2 degrees at kickoff. They got 3 starting linebackers out, a starting corner, Xavier Howard, a Pro Bowl corner, Bradley Chubb, great pass rusher. Even their offensive players, Mostert, Waddle, looks like they'll probably play, but they probably won't be 100%. I mean, nobody's 100%, you know, at this stage of the season, but Mahomes, Kelsey resting up last week. I think that Andy Reid, what do we always say? Andy Reid off a bye week. I'm not saying they didn't prepare for the Chargers. They did, but they know the Chargers. It was backups in that game. They're going to be, it's almost a bye week to kind of like regroup and rethink everything, sort of like a fresh season for Kansas City. -4.5 at home. They already beat Miami by 7 on a neutral field game. The Chiefs could win this one big. I mean, it's possible it's close, but I really think that this might be like a 21-3 Kansas City lead. Maybe the Dolphins score late to make it somewhat respectable. But I think Kansas City should have no problem winning this game. Give me the Chiefs -4.5. And we could go 6-0, Tom.
Yeah,
it is very possible.
On that Germany game, point total was 35. And that was with no cold.
That's true.
Granted, it was in like 5 different time zones away or what have you. Because
but
of the length of the show, we are going to be bypassing trivia. And I mean, I think for statement of the week, Kamen, we can just kind of talk about what you have, because between the Belichick and Saban conversation, between the Super Bowl picks, there have been a lot of statements flying fast and furious. But if you have one more you want to tack on for a mutual love-hate relationship that you and I share for a particular organization, we can definitely touch on that a little bit real quick.
Yeah, just felt the Bears, like something that's very rare in sports. They pretty much let go of every single assistant, which, by the way, the head coach, Matt Eberflus, basically handpicked.
Yes.
And they got rid of Getsy, the offensive coordinator, which, as far as coaching, that's probably the biggest problem. But I think Eberflus had to go as well. I mean, they got better year 2, but I mean, 3 wins versus 7 wins. They still were a bad team, 7-10. A lot of their wins came against bad teams, beating the Commanders, the Falcons, the Vikings, who were, at the time banged up. They didn't really like go out there and beat some of these big NFL teams.
1-6 was their record against playoff teams this year.
Say that again?
The Bears were 1-6 against playoff-bound teams.
So Detroit was the one they got, right? The one playoff win was the Lions, which they should have beat the Lions twice, which is a big problem. They blew 2 double-digit leads in the fourth quarter.
Like 4.
No, 3 or 4. It was the Browns game, the Lions game, and what was the other
Broncos.
One? Broncos. 3 especially
and maybe the
egregious.
Lions. No, you mentioned Lions. Yeah, like they had some
bad
Lions. Losses. Yeah.
So they had some really bad losses, which, Eberflus is a defensive coach. The defense, which again, the defense looked really good the second half of the year, but it also looked really good against the bad teams in the NFL. So how much of that was playing bad teams, I don't know. But the fact that a defensive coach blew so many of these leads really doesn't look good. I know they're saying the team's got a positive culture. That might be somewhat true. I know they're feeding that to the media, feeding that to the fans. But I mean, the Bears really want to get better. Their goal is to be a playoff team, not to be mediocre. Eberflus isn't the worst coach out there, but he's a mediocre football coach. And, at some point, you got to stop the line of mediocrity. Eberflus had to go. So really curious. Everybody else went but Eberflus. So I did think the Bears are making the wrong move here in retaining their coach.
And that's not to even talk about the fact that not 1 but 2 assistant coaches had to be fired mid-season for non-football related issues. The Bears never released any sort of comment, and it hasn't been officially reported as to the reason why. But from the different I'm not saying sources like I'm reporting or anything like that, but from different folks in the know talking about it, kind of questionable behavior from their running backs coach and their defensive coordinator. Leading to them getting let go, which, as you said, hired by Matt Eberflus when he was brought in as the head coach. And in a time where, like you already know, Mike Vrabel's available, Pete Carroll is available, Jim Harbaugh.
Did they know that? I think the Eberflus was a little bit earlier before that. Or no, I think Carroll came out after Eberflus.
Well, Carroll came out after.
I'm not sure about Vrabel.
But no, they announced it on Wednesday that Flus was staying.
Right, and Pete Carroll was like an hour later, Tom, because I was actually like following it all.
But that's just to say, like, so they knew about Mike Vrabel, but the fact that they said, well, we're going to hang on to this guy, even though there's Ben Johnson from Detroit, pretty good offensive mind that you could talk to. Bobby Slowick from Houston. I mean,
I just don't think the Detroit guy's going to go to Chicago, but that's just me.
There was just like a lack of vision as far as what we could achieve. And I think, and I don't necessarily know I have this exactly right, I think you'd have to go all the way back to 1991 to the last time that the Bears aligned a general manager, head coach, and quarterback without any sort of weird overlap.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, like just in recent memory, recent vintage, you put Mitch Trubisky on Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy coming in. You put Justin Fields on Matt Eberflus, Ryan Poles coming in. And now you're either going to be you're going to possibly draft a rookie, number 1 overall with Caleb Williams potentially in the draft. And then if the season doesn't go well, you're then putting a new coach and coordinator with a quarterback, or even with Justin Fields, if you're doing that sort of thing. It's just not evenly balanced or layered as far as how you're building an organization. And in a year where you've got 2 top 10 picks, you've got the 7th most cap space. There's a lot of different things you can do.
They're going to keep Fields though, because it's like they kept the coach, but they didn't keep the OC. Like, do you have just a gut feeling? Because I actually watched some clips from the press conference, and I think Ryan Poles is still undecided. If you ask me,
I think undecided, but my gut would say keep Fields is what they're going to end up doing. I think they're going to justify it as we can get as big, if not bigger, of a haul for that number 1 overall pick.
Which Marvin Harrison, by the way, announced today he's officially declaring for the draft.
Yep.
No
Technically,
surprise.
Caleb Williams has not announced that he's going to the draft. I'd be surprised if he didn't, because you want to get that clock started on your second NFL contract, because that's where the big bucks are.
Yeah.
But I'm leaning slightly that they're going to get a new offensive coordinator. They're going to stick with Justin Fields, and that they're going to say, hey, if we're bad again, we're going to clean house. Poles, Eberflus, everybody gone, Fields gone.
I think he has 2 years left on his contract. I think Eberflus, right?
Eberflus, yeah. So it'd be next year and then the season after. So it'd be easy to fire and let him go.
Though they could pick up his option, and then
they have to decide that by May this year if they want to pick up the 5th-year option.
That's for 1 year, but then after this next season, he's a free agent officially. Right.
Yeah, so this upcoming season will be his 4th year in the league. If they do not pick up his option by May, he will be a free agent after next year. If they do, he'll have 1 more year at like $20-something million, which for a quarterback.
So it's going to be 1 or 2 more years, but in 3 years from now, they would have to make the official like this is it or this is not it type decision.
Or they could franchise tag him. They could also do that and just make it another 1-year thing. Like they still have plenty of like contract control.
At that point, though, they would probably move on because it'd be, or they would keep them. If they like what they've seen.
The justification for them would probably be we can keep Fields because we have seen some improvements in addition to the wow factor that he can bring.
Only everybody passing touchdowns.
Everybody in the league loves him. Like opponents, teammates, everybody loves Justin Fields.
But then again, you see the draft picks. They're saying that they'll get a 2nd round pick for him.
Those are teams. I'm talking about like the players in the league, like.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we can discuss that forever.
That's a different topic, but
I'm ready to move on from Fields, Tom, but we'll talk about that at a later show for sure.
Exactly.
Just wanted to get your gut feeling as to what they're doing, because I'm totally 50-50 as to what they will do. But anyway, Marvin Harrison's great too. I can see the justification for Fields. I'm a Caleb Williams guy, but that's another show in its own self.
Yeah, we've got to go.
Maybe that's a great topic once we wrap up the NFL season. We can do off-season after Super Bowl ends. So,
absolutely.
Anyway, that's about it for tonight. Very, very busy show. We'll be back next week talking plenty more about the playoffs. We'll have some really, really interesting matchups, no matter what happens, honestly. So can't wait to get into that, Tom. Have a great day. As always, thank you so much for co-hosting with me. Thank you to all the watchers, the listeners, the viewers. You guys are great. Have a great, great weekend. Stay safe with all this bad weather in the Chicagoland area. Bundle up and watch some football, baby. It's America's game. Football.
Buy some
Have
Peacock.
A good one, Tom.
$5.99.
What'd you say? $5.99. Free trial Peacock.
There you go.
I've got it already, so I'm good. Have a good one, Tom.
You
we'll see you next week.